It's time for Windows Weekly. Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley are here, and a very special guest. We're going to talk, of course, about the latest version of Windows, the update that just came out, the Creators Update, how it's going 1 week in. We'll give you the latest on Redstone 3, the next big update, speculation about the hardware event, and then Rich Turner joins us. He's responsible for that bash shell on Windows that Paul hates so much. Questions and answers from Rich Turner coming up next on Windows Weekly.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Windows Weekly is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com. This is Windows Weekly with Paul Thurrott and Mary Jo Foley, episode 514, recorded Wednesday, April 19th, 2017. Bash on Windows. Windows Weekly is brought to you by Cloudflare, the operating system for the edge of the internet. More than 6 million websites, apps, APIs, and SaaS companies use Cloudflare's services to load fast, stay secure, and weather whatever the internet throws at them. For a free online chat session with a Cloudflare support engineer, visit cloudflare.com/twit. It's time for Windows Weekly, the show where we get together with two of the brightest lights in technology journalism. And
judging from the lights on their faces.
And they're so bright, I had to turn the screen down to talk about Microsoft. Paul Thurrott from Thurrott.com. Mary Jo Foley from allthingsmicrosoft.com. Hello, you two.
Hello.
We won't say who, or unless you want to.
No, we can. We can say.
You know what? Because it's a podcast, you really can't surprise people. It says it in the title. It says it in the description. Sure. So they already know that Rich Turner is going to join us to talk about Paul's favorite subject.
Is it Hello Kitty?
No.
Yes.
No, not Pinterest either. It is the bash shell. So Rich has been on before. You're getting him back on in a little bit. About an hour from now. If you want to just skip ahead and skip all the other stuff, go ahead.
No, you'll miss all the good stuff.
I always forget because I come from a live broadcast. Crap. I come from a live broadcast background, radio, and we do these live. But I always forget that really there's no point in teasing. There's no point in saying.
I think a lot of people still enjoy it like a radio.
I guess so, mostly because they're driving and they can't take their hand off the wheel, so they're stuck listening.
I don't know if you must have seen the new Mystery Science Theater is out, right?
Yes,
one of the great jokes, and I think the second episode is one of the robots says, Josh or whatever the new guy's name is. He says, "What's a radio?" He says, "It's like a podcast you can't control."
Oh, I love it. We got some recognition. Well, of course, Felicia Day knows all about all this stuff. She's
sure.
And Patton Oswalt probably does a few podcasts in his spare time. Kind of the thing now, apparently. I was talking to Kevin Pollak, the comic, and he says it's really annoying because everybody has a podcast now. And
by the way, comedian podcasts are almost routinely the most unfunny things on earth.
Everybody has
they
one.
They are terrible.
And Kevin says it's like the new would you try the beer I brewed at home, or would you come to my show? Would you be on my podcast? He says, and it's really awkward.
Everyone's shilling for Harry's razors.
Yeah, same ads on all of them. I feel the blame for that because we kind of pioneered the whole idea of advertising in podcasts, and many of these advertisers, once they tried, us, went on to sponsor like every podcast they could find. I'm proud to say none work as well as this show, but they keep trying.
Good luck, Kevin Pollak.
Good luck, Pollak. He's fun. I have listened to his podcast. He's good. He's good. He's a funny guy. He's in some new.
A lot
movie.
of comedians I really like, and man, their podcasts.
But you're right.
Well,
they all look at Mark Maron and they go, "Well, if that guy can do it, I can."
Yeah, I guess all I have to do is mumble and I'll be popular. It doesn't really work that way.
If he can interview the president, why can't I?
Sure.
Anyway, enough bashing the competition because they're not competition.
No,
it's
I don't even think of them as competition.
No, it's all one big happy family.
Because they're not funny. No, sorry.
You know, I gotta talk to those guys at Podcast Expo. I gotta.
Yeah, about that Thurrott thing.
Yeah, Thurrott. Yeah. No, actually, that's exactly what we say. Well, you know, Thurrott. That's exactly what we say.
I think that conversation is repeated around the globe every day.
You know, Paul. What can I say? That's Paul. Paul's Paul. Paul's being Paul. Let Paul be Paul.
Sure.
Wow, we have a show title before we've even begun the show. So before we get to Mr. Bash, Rich Turner, what do you want to? Should we start with we're getting ready for this May 2nd event,
right?
And even though the only clue is the hashtag Microsoft EDU, seems like Microsoft Cloud might be part of this deal. And we're hearing a little bit, we're learning a little bit more, are we, about this new version? Is it safe to say it's a new version of Windows?
It's a new product version.
Edition.
New
right?
SKU.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
A SKU. That's exactly right.
Yep.
Well, but it will be a little different in some ways, or not.
Right.
Is this like what was it what do they call it? Windows Basic? What do they call it? Windows Starter Edition.
And then Windows RT also.
Windows RT.
Well, it's not Windows RT, right? Because that was for
there are parallels, right? I mean, I honestly, I know I keep saying this, but I think the one mistake we're all making, not you, the three of us, I mean, like collectively,
no, we make no
mistakes as an
mistakes.
industry.
Yes.
No, I mean, outside of this podcast,
yes,
is tying this thing too closely to Chromebooks, right? In other words, this is Microsoft's Chromebook competitor. It's a lot more nuanced than that, but that will be part of it. I mean, so obviously that will be part of it. But I think don't think of it as a basic version. Don't think of it as a stripped down version. Although you can make the argument it is stripped down in some way. And so we'll see. I'm going to be, I think like a lot of people, I'll be paying very close attention to how they describe it when they do announce it. And I've argued in the past that I don't think this thing makes a ton of sense, quite frankly. I sort of understand on some level what they're trying to do, but the store has failed. And that's some device going to town in my office.
I'm like, is that Skype?
No, it's Frank Shaw as usual.
He
calls whenever you start talking.
What's 646? Is that a look? I don't even know.
Oh yeah, see,
New York. It's my phone number. I'm calling you.
It's rattling home. Your beer order.
It's rattling home, yeah.
Your pony is ready.
Anyway, so there was an unrelated blog post about Microsoft Edge this week, and I read this line and I thought to myself, "That's it. This is the justification for Windows 10 Cloud." They unintentionally sort of revealed it, because when you think about it, the very notion of a version of Windows that can only run store apps is ludicrous. There are no store apps, and there could be something coming at Build where they'll expand the availability of desktop apps to the store, and maybe that will help or whatever. But this is a fundamental problem for this product. But this is the line that the Edge post mentioned. It's probably not the first time they've said this. It says Windows users already spend more than half their time on the web. And I think that's the central justification. In fact, that's the reason for the name, that you are accessing cloud services through web applications using Microsoft Edge. Now, in the original shipping version of this product, the creator's update, that's not particularly sophisticated. It doesn't offer features that let you, pin these things in the start menu, or actually, I guess you could pin web pages in the start menu, but you can't pin them to the taskbar and so forth. They don't offer some of the things that you see for simple web apps on, say, like Chrome or even Internet Explorer. But Microsoft had a post from it might have been last summer, actually, where they talked about how Edge was going to support progressive web apps. And those things are going to integrate with the operating system, be available through the store, and have native app-like features. And I think that's the point. I think that's what Windows 10 Cloud really is. Obviously, store apps is a big part of it.
I think you're probably right about your guesses on this, but the name is still horrible. The name is horrible. Yes,
I agree. I'm desperately.
What is it about it that you don't like?
So
because it suggests other things.
most people who hear Windows 10 Cloud immediately jump to, oh, finally Microsoft's doing Windows 365. You guys said they weren't going to do this.
Windows is truly Windows as a service.
Right, and this is not what that is.
Windows as a subscription service, right? Which I think is what everyone's waiting for. That hammer to fall.
Yeah.
We've been told repeatedly they're not doing that, and I don't believe there's anything about Windows 10 Cloud that has anything to do with that. I don't think that is the point at all.
Same. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep. And okay, I like your theory that what's basically happening is Microsoft is expanding what counts as a store app, right? Like they're going to make these apps store apps. Okay, that makes sense. But again, this still kind of the EDU hashtag.
It's crazy. I know. It's nuts. I know. And the thing is, there would had to have been some secret effort done in concert with multiple educational institutions that has never leaked to anyone in the world to bring, Windows Store apps to education in some meaningful way. And I think we both believe that that's not happening. I'm sure there'll be some effort. But when you talk about the cloud, when you talk about web apps, when you talk about the future of what are line of business apps in enterprises, I think we can all also agree that web apps make a ton of sense. Like that's where the effort makes sense. And it would make sense in education as well, because education is a form of an enterprise. So it's interesting because it still doesn't make complete sense because those capabilities are not present today. They're not available yet. But Build's right around the corner.
Right.
That is the obvious place for them to discuss this again, because they haven't mentioned progressive web apps, I don't think, since last summer, whenever that was.
Yeah.
And they were very specific about the capabilities that these web apps would have, and this would all have to go through Microsoft Edge, which we know is only updated with major new versions of Windows. And so, this thing we're talking about, in many ways, can't make sense until September, October, November, whenever RS3 comes out.
Really, you think?
Well, that's what I don't know. I mean,
Okay, so my guess is this is going to be available way sooner than that, especially if this is an EDU event, because for back to school, you really have to be there in the early summer.
Right, like June, right? I mean, they start buying decisions.
Sorry, I think Windows 10 Cloud happens a lot sooner and on that time scale. What I mean is the thing that makes it make sense, these web apps, this more sophisticated web app infrastructure in Windows 10. I mean, I suppose they could add it before RS3, but it seems like this is an RS3 feature.
But so there's Windows Cloud hardware too, right?
Well, okay, so that's the part we don't know for sure. Like we think there's going to be a new Surface device possibly unveiled at this event. And if there is, we're thinking it's something like a Surface 4, like something very basic and more entry level, not necessarily cheap, but not a Surface Pro, not a Surface Book, but some new thing.
What about an inexpensive Surface Book? Like, I mean, I guess I'm going back to that Chromebook thing, but
yeah. Well, we've heard.
Isn't that what schools want though? Is like a cheap laptop?
Yeah. And Microsoft may leave that up to OEMs, right? So, the Walking Cat, our buddy who always finds all the code names and stuff, he found something in the store, in the Windows Store. It's a collection for students and scholars. It's called Cloudbook. A collection of apps. So that begs the question, is there going to be a category of devices called Cloudbooks? Is Cloudbook just like a subset of apps? Is Microsoft building something they're going to call a Surface Cloudbook, which is something I guessed just off the top of my head a while ago, but I didn't have anybody telling me that.
The name's beautiful. And I think it makes more sense for there to be partners involved in this, right? In other words, that the HPs, Lenovo's, Dells, et cetera, of the world should be the ones doing these things, because they're the ones who are going to sell computers that are $299 and up, that will sell to schools.
Right. And Microsoft could build the equivalent of the Pixel Chromebook, right? Like they could build the high-end, beautiful device that some people in higher education might want, professors might want them. Maybe that's what they're going to build if they are building a device, which we don't know.
But the central paradox here is that I'm just creating science fiction here. I'm imagining what they might do because I know that the people who work at Microsoft in the Windows division or whatever we're calling it these days are smart people, that they are, they're not creating something stupid. And yet I look at this and I have a hard time understanding what the point is. Like what's the market? Why would anyone today choose such a thing?
Right.
It makes it hard to understand. People were sitting in a room eating donuts and drinking coffee, and someone said, "Hey, what do you think about a cloud book?" And everyone was like, "That's a great idea." Somewhere along the line, someone said yes to this. Like people think this is a good idea.
It feels to me like a bigger strategy, I don't know. It feels to me like somebody came into the meeting.
Drunk.
No, and said, we got a problem. We got a problem. Have you seen this graph? Look at Chromebooks. Look at Windows.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Sure.
And how do we address this problem? And this sounds like something that a committee would kind of come up with. I don't feel like Paul does it. It's a bad thing.
By the way,
but
the committee has already come up with this idea several times.
Right.
So that's where Windows XP starter edition came from.
We need a cheap laptop, and
that was a netbook replacement, right?
Yeah, netbooks were a bad idea. Yeah.
They were they were running Linux, and they were selling really well. And Microsoft was selling Windows Vista.
That's right. I forgot
Windows Vista
the
was
early
too
ones.
fat to fit on those little devices.
Yeah.
So they actually came up with a new version of XP after Vista shipped. And they put to beat these guys, And by the way, it worked, but. This is the same strategy, assuming they're literally coming out with something called a cloud book or whatever.
Right. Which is what we don't know, right? Like we're guessing on the hardware part of this. None of us, I don't think, has had somebody say to us, "Hey, psst, I have the cloud book. Here it is. Look."
Right. Right. No, I've never heard from anyone on that note.
Well, Paul, what could they do that would make you feel better about this? Is this just fundamentally flawed, or
the notion of progressive web apps is something I've been thinking about for a long time, because I come at this from a number of angles, but the big one is that the Universal Windows platform has not taken off in any meaningful way, and Microsoft has done everything that I think that they can do to make it work. With a few exceptions. I feel like their built-in apps in Windows 10 are frankly kind of an embarrassment and should be showcases for what's possible with the Universal Windows platform, and they just haven't stepped up in that direction. But I mentioned line of business apps, for example. Line of business apps are not changing into UWP apps. They're changing into web apps. I think web apps are the future of rich client apps with big screens. I think that like the PC, that new app development going forward is not going to be Universal Windows platform. It's going to be progressive web apps that, by the way, work everywhere. Work on Chromebooks. They'll work on iPad Pros. They'll work on whatever device you choose to use. And it's up to Microsoft to do what they always do, which is embrace and extend that platform so that these things work as well as they can within Windows and make Windows look and work better by letting them work with the notification system in Windows, by letting them work with the live tiles. In short, doing what Centennial does for desktop apps, which is apply Universal Windows platform capabilities to this other thing, providing people on Windows 10 with a native experience. I really do think this is the future of the apps platform on Windows. There's no version of this story where straight up UWP apps are successful. This is just never happening.
Right. But I'll tell you one thing they're not going to do. I'm almost 100% sure. They're not going to come to build and say, guess what? UWP is dead and we're not doing this anymore. That would be the worst possible message they could communicate to developers who've been jerked around.
That can't possibly be in the
No, they can't. They can't do
They're
that.
They're going to expand the definition of what is UWP even further than what they have now.
That's exactly right. The other thing they could do, by the way, is just cancel build like Intel did with IDF.
Isn't that wild? What the hell was that? That's really wild. I mean, they had it all booked and everything.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's interesting.
That cost them a little pretty penny to lose the venue, right? Microsoft did that in Chicago with Ignite.
Yes,
it doesn't come cheap to do that.
But the bigger issue there isn't it the PC, right? I mean, this is where they detailed their next gen processor platforms. Mm-hmm. The Intel statement about their explanation why they canceled this is we're focused more on the cloud now. Yikes! That should be alarming.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Wow. No wonder Windows on ARM is a project, I mean.
Yeah.
Yep.
Jeez.
Or vice versa. Windows on ARM.
Maybe that's what did it?
Played into, I mean, you never know the chicken and the egg on these things, but.
It's very strange. Boy, that one just boggled my mind when I read that.
It's a surprise,
All right. We'll find out May 2nd. We'll cover it live. We're going to do the keynote. You'll be there. I'm getting up at the ungodly hour of. Well, the event starts Pacific 6 a.m. So I'll have to get up at 5:45.
It actually starts like 6:30.
Oh,
but
really?
You get an extra half hour.
Believe me, that makes a difference. So,
yeah, I think they're going to start streaming it live. They will stream it, by the way, also live, starting at 6. But I think the actual event is 6:30. I'm pretty sure it is.
Probably have to get here at 6 anyway.
And can I throw out a meetup thing here?
Yeah, you can do a meetup.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you're in New York,
let me guess.
May 1st, the day before, we're going to have a meetup at Rattle and Hum, of course.
Which, if you ever said, like, Gray's Papaya, I would just fall over.
Bar in New York.
At the Olive Garden on the corner of 44th.
No, it's going to be Rattle and Hum because Rattle and Hum is like a 5-minute walk from the event venue.
Perfect.
And it's going to be Monday, May 1st, 5 p.m. till 8. We will be there. You don't need to RSVP. You can just come.
Look for Andrew Zarian out front of it.
Look for the magician with the rosé and take a left.
There may be, I can't promise this, there may be some special guests coming from Microsoft.
Oh man, you're good. You are good, Mary Jo. You are good. This is a big pre-event. This is not some let's go get drunk kind of a thing. This is it might be that too, but no, I'm just kidding. No, it is not about mass consumption. It is really, truthfully, going to be, because this is where you get to see, Chris Capicella before he takes the stage.
Oh, man, I would love him to show up. Chris, if you're listening, come on out.
Or so who's the new hat guy? Mr. Good Hair. Joe. Yeah, Joe. Maybe Joe. Will Joe come? Maybe Joe should come.
That would be nice.
Oh, that would be cool. Sure. You just don't know.
The ultimate would be if Satya Nadella comes, but
I think
we're
we
not
can
promising.
bet that's not going to happen unless he really likes beer. He might be a big beer guy. I don't know.
We're going to find out.
Yeah. Actually, this is it's funny because because of the hashtag Microsoft EDU, I would have written this event off, but you, with all your speculation, your silly clouds talk, have made this a very interesting event.
Yeah,
and it is their only
turning into storytellers, Leo.
You're good. Job. You're your NFL films, right? No rival. Yep. So, okay. It is going to be very interesting, and there's no other hardware event we know of. This is it.
Well, we should throw out Paul's speculation on this.
Go
ahead.
Well, yeah. So go ahead.
It's no one wants responsibility for this, Paul. This is you, all you, baby.
This is all you, buddy.
I throw myself out in front of the bus every episode, and I'm starting to feel like it's not worth it.
So you thinking there'll be another event?
I've heard twice now from someone who has seen the next version of Surface Pro. I was told explicitly that this coming event will not have an upgraded Surface Pro.
Right.
Me too. Same.
I don't believe that Microsoft can wait 2 years between releases on these products.
Right. They need to.
Something has to happen with Surface Pro and with Surface Book, I think. We've heard rumors of a Surface Book clamshell. So this all leads me to wonder, maybe there'll be another event. Maybe there is going to be a Surface event. We've tied these things together. You got to remember, this was us doing this, back. If you go back to January, for example, I heard April 7th was the date that was thrown out for me for the creators update. And I was told there will be hardware. They were going to do this event together. And of course, when I hear that from my sources, I naturally think Surface now because Microsoft makes Surface. And so this event, which is not exactly the creators update, but I think it's going to focus largely on the creators update, right? I think it's going to continue the theme of creators and how that applies to education and how important that is in education. And
lest we forget, that was a big part of, that was like the focus of the last event. The creators update event.
Yep.
We were all kind of surprised by how much they focused on kids.
But you know what?
Surprised and confused.
Here's my naysaying on this idea. So both you and I have heard independently from our sources that Surface Pro 5 is just going to be an update to Kaby Lake and nothing else. Like no update on the power cord, no update on any of the drives. There's like very little that's new. I keep hearing Surface Book 2 not till fall.
Okay.
Because they're not quite ready. So if they do have another hardware event, which I have not heard, but I'm not poo-pooing it entirely, what would they announce?
Yep. Right. Well, it could be the Surface something that they don't announce at this thing, the other thing. But by the way, if Surface Book was revved, Performance Pace came out last October. So there's your midstream replacement. That never happened with Surface Pro. Surface Pro is their best-selling device. It seems like there should be some import placed on this thing. It's possible that they just released a Kaby Lake update to the web. I mean, they've never done it, but it doesn't mean they can't. If it's minor enough, they could literally just announce one day on a blog that we have a new, we've updated it. Or yes, right. That's true too. Yep. We have turned into a speculation engine.
Yes, we have.
It's Microsoft has reduced us to just
guesswork,
having to guess. I don't know.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, it means they're keeping things secret, which is good for them. Hopefully, it's good that because it's something really awesome, they're keeping secret, not because it's not a big deal keeping secret.
Sure. Yeah. Well, we'll find out eventually. I mean, I know what I've been told. I know what's happening, and all I can say is they don't line up in some ways, and that is confusing.
So if you think there's another hardware event, do you think it's in May?
I think it would have to be, right? I mean, I don't know anything about it. I'm just speculating that there should be.
Yeah.
Okay. Build does happen in May, and you're right. Build would be a place where if you wanted to throw it in with a bunch of other stuff, that might make some sense, right? Remember, before we knew this was, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I keep asking Microsoft, are you having a hardware giveaway at Build? And I cannot get an answer still. So that also fuels the speculation. What if they announced Surface Pro 5 and gave one to everybody there? What if?
Okay. So
Can I go? Forget my son's graduation. I'm on my way.
But that doesn't make any sense, right? Oh. Nobody needs a Surface Pro 5.
I do.
At Build. No, I mean, in other words, the case for giving away hardware at Build is we want you to target this platform. You don't have a device like this, so here's a device. In other words, it would make sense for them to give out the headsets, the Windows.
Something new and different.
Yeah.
That would. Years past, they've given out specialty machines. What do you say?
And cheaper.
I said something cheaper.
Well, not necessarily, but we talked about again, this is pure speculation, but something that would make a lot more sense would be a prototype ARM device.
Right.
So developers could write to ARM. That's actually arguably necessary.
That would make a ton. Yeah, I think they've got to be talking about ARM at Build. I mean, they got to talk about Windows 10 ARM, not the mobile version, but the one that they're building as from scratch to work on Qualcomm, right? So yes. I mean, if you're a developer, you need something to develop on for that if you're targeting that platform. So maybe that could be another thing.
And it literally requires brand new hardware. No one has a thing that could run this. Like there is no person out in the world that has some device that would work. So that would make sense.
What about Surface RT? Come on. I still have mine.
So sorry.
I know. It's not going to be that. I know.
Yeah. I have literally gotten from more than one person has written me and said, hey, now that Microsoft is going to ARM again, do you think that means they'll start updating the RT device?
Me too.
And it's like, guys, seriously, blow out the candle.
We need the sad trombones.
The ship that didn't sail. It hit an iceberg. It sunk.
Yeah.
They've made movies about it.
And you know what? I had a Surface RT. I don't miss it.
It was a cute little
it just wasn't that useful.
Yeah. Anyway, so the bottom line is we don't know. We're just guessing. The one thing I feel good about is Windows 10 Cloud being revealed on May 2nd. I feel good about that.
I feel good. Da, 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 da.
Cloudy with a chance of Windows.
Yeah. All right. It's fun to, speculation is part of the fun of these events. I don't know if that has always been in the case with Microsoft or if Apple kind of influenced it, but
you're right. It's become fairly consuming. I guess I have a slight appreciation for what Apple goons go through every day.
Oh my God, yeah, it's just nonstop.
It really must.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just becomes what your life is.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, and in fact, it eats itself because then you it's like you can't. You have to. Every rumor is important.
I know.
You can't ignore anything anymore.
Yep.
And it's not good.
And then you're running off with the pack after something like totally inane, right? And it's like, wait, why am I saying
why
this
am I
is gonna
chasing this silly rumor?
I feel like this came up on a recent episode, but I pride is the wrong word, but I'll say I used to take a certain pride in the fact that I would literally ignore certain things, and if people ever asked me about them, I could reply and say, "There's a reason I ignored that. It's not important."
Yeah.
And now I sort of feel like the noise level when you ignore something is so loud, it's just not worth ignoring. You have to address it just to say, no, this is dumb. You know, it's become a terribleness. I don't know. It's really strange.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And I really think you can blame Apple for this. I really do.
I do. I blame Apple for almost everything, Leo.
Yeah. Everything. Yep. So let's move along and talk about Redstone 3. Actually, should we talk about the creators update first and like how that is? The rollout began a week ago.
Yep.
You know,
I don't not much feedback on this so far.
Haven't heard a lot. No,
I really haven't, and I typically hear.
But
a few, absolutely a few, but I usually hear from a lot of people. In fact, most of the feedback I've heard has been from people who say something like, I have a Surface Book. You would think I would get this right away. I have not received it.
Yeah.
They're clearly taking a very conservative approach to this. And I guess if you're a Surface owner, because I don't believe it's gone out to Surface devices, and I'm basing that only on feedback.
Because I forced mine and you forced yours. Yeah.
I forced mine, so I don't really know. But, you know, I think what you should be looking for if you have a Surface device is some firmware updates, right? Because that's what would come first, right before the creators update is unleashed.
And we got those last week.
Well, yeah, we did. Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, I don't believe it's happened though.
Really?
No, I don't think
I feel bad then for forcing it because I should have probably been a good boy and just let it happen. I have a Surface Book and a Surface Studio, and I
haven't heard from anybody with either of those who've gotten it, but I've heard from somebody with a newer Dell machine who got it. I've heard from somebody who built their own PC who got it.
What?
That makes a little bit of sense.
So now it's just random.
Well, it's not. No, it's not random. It's literally known good configurations, right?
Yeah.
I actually have a newer Dell that I'm reviewing, and it's still on 1607.
It is.
That surprises me. That one I didn't update it, I think because I was reviewing it or whatever, but I went to do some game mode testing, and game mode isn't there, of course, because it's 1607. And I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? But brand new Dell laptop doesn't have it.
Yeah. My HP doesn't have it. It hasn't gotten it yet.
Right.
So, yeah.
On the good news front, it doesn't make a lot of complaints.
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference.
You know, as it turns out, when you don't deliver bad software to people, no one complains.
I have one guy say it didn't work. I've only had one person say it didn't work and it automatically reverted to the previous version.
Oh, interesting.
Successfully.
Huh.
Okay, interesting.
And neither of you have had. I haven't had any problems. Neither of you have had problems. Nothing weird happened.
No, I mean I was almost going to say I never had any problems with the anniversary update, but of course I was a trailblazer with that one, wasn't I?
You did. You did have problems.
My webcam didn't work for 2 months straight.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, here's Rambling Geek. I got it yesterday on my work PC, which is an HP Pro Desk.
Okay. And
so it's coming to different people.
So he got it and it had no problem.
Yeah, seemingly. He's not saying he had.
All right, so I'm going to put a check in the box on the left side of the chart back here. We're going to start hearing from everybody. We'll just.
I know.
We should put pins in a map. Why don't we? That would be fun.
Yeah. Where are you, Bob?
Bob. Well, I hear Muncie just got it.
Yep.
Well, it's interesting.
CNN is ready to call Muncie in favor of the creators update.
Florida. I just want to say.
Now project that the creators update has successfully deployed.
Oh, that's funny. Let's see. RS3 is Redstone 3. And you said earlier that that's a fall, projected for the fall.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're up to build a third test build for Redstone 3 that just came out right before the show. So if you're in Fast Ring, you got the latest build today, which is 16179 for PCs.
Right. It includes 2 features.
Yep. Well, one of them isn't new. The one named after you is not new.
I know. There's a feature called power throttling, and I can't look at
Power
that
throttling.
phrase. It just looks like my name to me.
It does.
I just
In fact,
feel
I've
like
even said
more
it that
egotistical
way.
than I mean it to mean, but I see myself in the words.
What are besides power throttling? What else?
The other feature.
What else? Are we gonna get?
So in Hyper-V and I'm sure in other virtualization solutions, you have a system of checkpoints. So if you're about to do some software update or something in the virtual machine, you can set a checkpoint. And if you want to, you can go back later and return it to the way it was before.
How is that different from a system restore point?
It's a feature of the VM, not the underlying operating system.
Oh.
I'm sorry, but that feature's already been there. So that feature's existed in Hyper-V for a long time.
Yeah,
But
actually,
just
even
added,
VMware has something similar. It's not.
Yeah, I would imagine all virtual machines have something like this. It's a rollback feature, right, at the VM level. So in this build, they've added a new feature that's tied to that. And I think it's called auto revert or auto checkpoint, whatever.
VM.
Revert VM. So
VM.
It's basically doing that, but automatically. And so if you power up the VM, it's based on the power cycle. So once you power up the VM, basically there is a checkpoint of some kind that's made, and you can go back to the way it was before you powered it on. So if you screw it up during that session, you can go back to the way it was automatically without having to have had set a checkpoint. By the way, if you use Hyper-V, setting a checkpoint is wicked easy. So you should. This is like it's like when you're writing a document and you kind of reflexively hit like Control S to save all the time. If you're worried about it, it's that easy. It's very easy to set a checkpoint in Hyper. But anyway, they're doing it automatically once for each session now.
That's it, really. That's
it so far. I mean, they're doing a lot of under the covers stuff around one core still, right?
Yeah.
But
I'm
RS4
sure
is
they
gonna be
don't.
huge.
They don't want to tell us yet about what the new features are, right? Like
so it's too early.
They're trying to save that for build, I'm sure.
Okay.
Right.
Sure.
But let's talk about Windows 10 Mobile for a second, because this is super confusing. Surprisingly.
Windows 10 Mobile. What?
Yeah, so Microsoft also
I saw your article. Yeah.
Right. They're revving Windows 10 Mobile. So, let me step back. April 25th is the date. April 25th is the date when Microsoft's supposed to begin rolling out the Creators Update to a handful of Windows 10 Mobile handsets, the final version, the RTM, one may say. Only a few handsets are getting this. If you're not on the short list of phones, you have to stay on the release preview ring and get cumulative updates, as far as we know. That's the only way you're going to be able to get Creators Update if you don't have a phone on the short list. But here's what got more confusing. Microsoft has rolled out 2 new builds of Windows 10 Mobile over the past week or so, and they are in a splinter branch of the operating system that's not Redstone 3 and it's not Creators Update. It's something called Feature 2. And they haven't explained what this is. They haven't said really why they're doing this. The reason they gave was because we're trying to get everything together on one core, but that doesn't make sense because they just splintered the operating system. So my guess about what's happening is they're going to put Windows 10 Mobile on some kind of a maintenance mode where it will continue to get some kind of updates, but it won't go to Redstone 3. That's my guess. They haven't said this. Hopefully they're going to say something more definitive at build when we believe they'll talk about Windows 10 on ARM.
They're not very good about talking about bad news, are they?
No.
By the way, they've done this before too. This is the Windows Phone 7.8 release all over again, right? We're going to throw a bone. It's Windows RT getting a start menu,
Right.
We're gonna throw you a bone because we feel bad because we made all these promises about how awesome everything was going to be, and surprise, you guys actually use the product, and we don't know why you keep doing that, but we're gonna.
But here you are.
Yep, and you won't go away. And God, you're really loud on Twitter all the time. So here's a little something.
Yeah, that's our
It
guess.
does have it has a feel like that. Yeah.
It does have a feel like that, but they haven't said. So they're like today they rolled out a new test version of Windows 10 Mobile. It's not, like I said, not Redstone 3, not Creators Update. It's build 15205. It has a lot of bug fixes, no new features.
Yeah. So, Mary Jo, you'll know this because, to my knowledge, you're the only person on earth who ever covered it this way. But you had something about the screen sizes for Windows 10 on ARM. Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar?
It does.
This is off the top of my head. I want to say it was 6, 10, 14, maybe?
Yep, it was.
Is that it? Okay.
Right. So when Terry Myerson talked to me originally about Windows 10 on ARM that they're going to be doing, he said, it's going to come to all screen sizes, 6, 10, and 14.
So that means
it's the future, right? That's the future of the mobile operating system platform is Windows 10 on ARM. It's not Windows 10 Mobile.
That's right. And when you think about a device like the HP Elite X3, which is a Windows 10 mobile flagship phone, it's a 6-inch screen, by the way. It's a beautiful device, right? But it runs this kind of hobbled system. It wouldn't be surprising if the way this bad news is really couched is as good news, because the future of that stuff is Windows 10 on ARM. It could run on a form factor like that. It won't be that phone, right? It still needs an 835 processor. You'll have to probably get a new phone, I would imagine, to go get these things. It's not going to work on existing Windows phones, but there is a future there, right? And we've talked about this in the past, just kind of generally, that there's no reason why Windows 10 today, with a phone app and a message app and a SIM card, and could run on what is basically a mini tablet and be a phone. I mean, and
right.
It's not necessarily any better or any worse than Windows Phone is today, but you're going to continue plug this thing into a screen and a keyboard and a mouse and whatever, and it becomes a little mini computer on ARM that, by the way, runs x86 apps. I mean, it's a better future than just keeping Windows 10 Mobile kicking around.
Yeah.
I think.
My only question about Windows 10 Mobile is, so they're still selling phones running Windows 10 Mobile to vertical markets, like, the police department thing, right? So my guess is they're going to keep that operating system alive, keep updating it with cumulative updates. It's not going to be just like, okay, and now the future is this. I think there'll be that side branch.
They also
and they have
like
partners.
HP, right? I mean, you can't screw over HP in that way. There's I don't know why I just thought of this, but it reminds me a little bit of police cars. Remember, police cars were always Chevy Caprices, I think was the car. And
Crown Victorias.
Crown Victorias, excuse me. So long after, what was that company, Mercury? Who made those cars? Ford, I guess, Crown Victoria?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Crown Vic,
so long after Ford stopped making Crown Victorias, they actually still made them for police departments, right?
Yeah.
And so this, in some ways, is a little bit like that. We have to support this audience. They're too important not to. Can you imagine? I mean, it's one thing for people who are Windows Phone fans and they're very irate and they're very vocal on Twitter, whatever. It's one thing to kind of screw those guys over. Frankly, I think a lot of those guys are on edge after like Zune, Media Center, whatever. I mean, I don't know that they can handle one more of these things, but it is another thing entirely to do that to enterprises that may have adopted this HP device, to police departments that may have adopted whatever version of Windows Phone. I think this is a lot like the cloud stuff. It all makes total sense. We're speculating,
right?
But it does. But it makes sense. It makes sense.
We got to hustle along here because we've got a special guest.
Yeah.
Who, by the way, I don't know if you saw his tweet. Yeah, I think he's punking you a little bit, Paul. There, I don't. Let me see. I'll pull it up.
Here we go. I follow.
It's begun already. He's not even on yet.
I think he's giving you a hard time here. Let me pull it up and I can show you exactly what I mean. Notice, is there anything different about Paul's? Maybe if I zoom in a little bit about Paul's mug in that album art.
That's good.
Yeah,
it's a little different.
Yeah. Nice job, Rich. Well done.
That's funny.
Well, proves you can even do Photoshop with a bash shell. What else? What else is on our agenda? Charles Simonyi is coming back. I think that's amazing. I did an interview on triangulation with Joel Spolsky, who was on the Excel team way back when. You know, now he's, of course, a legend for Trello and Stack Exchange and everything. But I asked him, did you program in Hungarian? And he said, yes, we did. He said, I still do. And
by the way, absolutely. They call it different things. You know, Google calls it camel case or whatever, but Hungarian notation is very much still a thing in programming today.
Well, he said, and I said, do you think Microsoft still does? He said, probably not, because everybody has their own little thing. But Charles Simonyi kind of imposed a programming style on Microsoft coders. Some hated it. Spolsky says, I loved it. That every variable name had a very special way of building it based on what it did. And once you understood how it worked, you could look at a variable name and know exactly what it meant, which is fantastic.
It's 2017. It's not 1983, right?
Yeah.
It's 2017.
Yeah.
Charles Petzold works at Microsoft now.
Yeah.
Charles Simonyi is back at Microsoft.
He's back, baby.
Yep.
I mean, was Paul Allen coming back too? Where does this end?
There's a great chapter in Programmers at Work, which is still, I mean, it's that long out of print probably, if you could find a copy to use book bin, right next to the Delphi 3 Bible. It's awesome, Programmers at Work. And Simonyi is one of the chapters in there, and he describes his Hungarian notation and everything. So what is he doing, though? I mean, I don't want to be ageist, but how old is he?
He's got to be 70-ish. I mean,
yeah. I don't know. I didn't look that up, but
it's
so
getting
Microsoft
younger and younger to me. By the way, that's
right.
Hardly seems old now.
It's barely old.
Barely old.
Microsoft bought his company Intentional Software this week.
Oh.
So if you remember Charles Simonyi, he used to do something called intentional programming. Like that was his claim to fame. A lot of people knew him for that. When he left Microsoft way back in 2001 or 2, he founded this company, Intentional Software, which used to be all about intentional programming. Sometime more recently, that company morphed to become about collaboration and productivity software. I don't know when that happened, but this is the company that Microsoft bought. And in acquiring the company, they announced he's coming back. He's going to be a technical fellow in the Office division. Wow.
Mark Lakowski will come back and work on the next generation file system for Azure. It's crazy. Right. This is so weird.
It was pretty surprising. When I saw that, I was like, wait, he's coming back?
Well, they kept his office exactly the way he left it in 2000. Yeah. So he'll feel right.
What's Brad Silverberg doing? Can we bring him back next?
He's still at Ignition, maybe.
He's a good guy.
Steven Sinofsky's looking, I'm sure.
We're okay.
Yeah, maybe
I think we're good.
Okay, thank you.
You got to close the border at some point.
You're so cold. So cold. Is this Wunderlist renamed? Project Cheshire is here. Microsoft. Yep. Did they acquire the whole company or just Wunderlist?
They acquired 6
Wunderkinds. Okay, because they have other apps as well. So, but Wunderlist is the to-do list.
Yep.
Which I love.
Is Brad the one who first reported about Project Cheshire? I think he was.
Oh, interesting.
We don't have to give Brad any credit. The point is,
let's give him some kudos.
Brad Sams, by the way, not
Brad Sams, not Silverberg.
Not Brad Silverberg.
The other Brad. Right. No, so Microsoft's been privately testing this thing called Project Cheshire for almost a year, and we knew it was a new to-do program. I had heard it was going to replace Wunderlist, and today was the day that they acknowledged publicly, yes, this is the successor to Wunderlist. It goes to public. Go ahead.
They told me that in January.
Did they? Oh, good. Okay.
Yep. Yeah, Ryan Gavin told me that, and in fact,
right.
I stopped him in mid-conversation. I said, "Stop! You got to hold on." I said, "You just said that Wunderlist is going away and it's becoming Microsoft To Do." And he said, "Yep." To Do. Yep. I said, "Have you ever said that anywhere else before?" And he said, "Yeah, I think we said something about it, a month ago or whatever." I'm like, "I don't think so."
Nope.
And so I had the PR person went and looked it up, and she actually got back to me and she said, "Yeah, here's the post from December where we discussed this, and it is mentioned nowhere in this post." So I wrote her back and I said, "Look, it's not there, but I just want to be clear. You're okay with me writing about this, right?" And she said, "Yeah, it's public information." So we wrote an article about it, but
you did?
Yeah,
okay.
But I don't think Microsoft has ever actually formally announced it. I mean, he just said it to me.
Yeah, no, they never announced it formally till today when they said, "Here is the public preview If you have a Microsoft account or an Office 365 account, you're going to be able to use this on all kinds of different devices, Android phones, even Windows phones, running Windows 10 mobile, Windows 10, the web, ultimately on the Mac. So it's going to be cross-platform, but they're going to kill Wunderlist when this becomes fully realized and robust. That seemed to catch a lot of people by surprise today.
Yeah, because it's going to be on. It's going to a farm where Sunrise is running around hunting rabbits.
Right.
And they're friends, and they're going to hang out together. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't forget a Compli. Yeah, that's out there too.
Yeah.
All right.
Kicking its little legs when it has dreams.
It's funny. I wonder why this took so long. I mean, did they have to?
I don't know if you're seeing this, Paul, but a lot of people who I'm seeing who are downloading the public preview and trying it today are like, wow, this thing's horrible.
Oh.
They're like, it's too early. Like, this thing's not anywhere near as robust as Wunderlist. And so, I guess it's been in private testing for almost a year. It's interesting they pulled the trigger on it today. But it's very early.
I know. It's pretty looking. I personally, having gone through this a few times, I'm not 100% sure what the point of a standalone to-do application is,
Yeah.
But
there it is.
Yeah, because Outlook has tasks.
Right.
Yep.
And this integrates with Outlook tasks. That's the first integration that's part of this product.
Why have a different thing for the same thing?
Hey, look at Yammer, Teams, and Planner, and Office 365 groups. They have a lot of things that look like they overlap. This is in that family of things. Choice is good. Too much choice, not always good.
By the way, Taro Alhonen, sorry if I butchered that, did a version of the Microsoft blog post where they announced power throttling and changed all the references to that word to my name.
Power throttling.
So Frank Shaw wrote in, he says, we normally name bugs after Paul so we can say we squashed Paul or we whacked Paul. Or
It's a kind of notoriety of sorts.
It is.
But you do know my name. Okay.
That's right.
By the way, power throttling is not the final name of that feature. They made sure to say it's just
right, because the final name is Paul Thurrott.
Paul Throttling.
It's Paul Throttling.
Yeah.
Paul Throttling. Let us. Wait a minute. Xbox. I'll let Mary Jo go for a moment, and throw it over to Paul. The Scorpio.
Okay, so there was,
Scorpio.
Speaking of hardware events, there was some speculation, maybe, and actually fueled by Microsoft, maybe they would have a separate event for Scorpio sometime before E3, but no. They revealed late last week they will, in fact, unveil Scorpio at E3. So you don't have to wait for some other event. It's all happening there. Not a huge surprise, but just so you know, it's happening. Also, Microsoft seems to be back on the monthly feature update train, as we're now calling these things. They used to be called system updates for Xbox One. So we had 17.0. Was the greatest update 17.03 for Xbox? I think it was. But if it wasn't, it was 17.04. It's going to be a 17.05. They're going down that path now. So they're doing builds a little bit like Windows. And they announced a few new features for that. Nothing major, particularly worth discussing. And if you're a Halo Wars fan, I'm not really into real-time strategy games per se, but the remastered version of the original Halo Wars, which was called Halo Wars Definitive Edition, previously was only available if you bought Halo Wars 2, which is Windows 10 and Xbox One only. Now they're making it available as a standalone game. And it's in a cool move, they're going to make it available across Xbox One, Windows 10, and Steam, meaning it will run on other versions of Windows as well. If you buy the Windows 10 version or the Xbox One version, it is an Xbox Play Anywhere title, so you get that cross-platform thing. But if you have Windows 7 or Windows 8 or whatever, and you want to play this game on your PC, you'll be able to do so. So they didn't announce the pricing, but I think the date was April 20th. So that's like tomorrow. I think it's coming out tomorrow, but they didn't announce the date. They didn't announce the price. April 20th, is it? Could that be right?
Yeah, that's tomorrow.
I'll tell you, April 20th is tomorrow. You know how you guys should know, and I'm surprised you haven't commented on this yet.
What?
Mm-hmm.
Look behind me in my shot. Notice anything?
The Encyclopedia Britannica?
Oh,
there's nothing in her shelf. Is April 20th your moving day?
Yes, I'm moving tomorrow. This is the last Windows Weekly in this space.
It's kind of, you're right. You took so everything's packed, huh?
Everything's packed.
Wow.
That's crazy.
You're taking the plant, or are you going to leave that for the new owner?
I'm taking it. I'm taking like the nails out of the wall. I'm taking everything. Light bulbs.
Careful, the whole building will come down.
Nothing will remain. Well, congratulations. Do you need any help?
No, I'm going to just collapse tomorrow.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's great.
There's nothing worse. You're lucky though. At this point, you're really glad that you have a small place, and
I am.
You're not a pack hoarder or a pack rat.
No.
Yeah. Because this is when it really shows.
It does.
My 30,000 album collection, or
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let us. We're going to get Rich Turner on. I'm going to do an ad. We're going to get Rich on. What I would say is, Paul and Mary Jo, I'm sure, have questions for Rich. Well, maybe not Paul, but
I'll just queue up the Xbox. I'll be fine.
Yeah, I do want to encourage anybody who wants to talk about Bash on Windows to get in the chat room at irc.twit.tv or tweet Mary Jo Foley. She seems to be watching the Twitter at Mary Jo Foley. Any other way people could ask their questions? This is a great opportunity to talk to Rich Turner.
I know. We've been trying to get him on the show for a long time, so this is really fantastic.
Good. We'll get him queued up. We're calling right now, using, of course, the fabulous Skype, which we always are quick to praise. And while we're doing that, let us praise our sponsor, Cloudflare. I think people have heard of Cloudflare and probably are most aware of it as a kind of DDoS protection. In fact, if you go to the cloudflare.com site, on the front page, you see right there, under attack is like right at the top. And if you're being, DDoSed, denial of service attack, you can go right to cloudflare.com and mitigate instantly. But really, Cloudflare is a whole lot more than DDoS protection. Really, Cloudflare is 4 different technologies. It is performance-focused, security-focused, reliability-focused, and insight-focused. And let's talk about all of this at once. It's a CDN, a content distribution network with 110 data centers all over the world on every continent except Antarctica. They are everywhere. And that means your content is cached and brought closer to your consumers, speeding up the web. But it speeds it up in lots of other ways, too. They'll automatically enable all the latest internet protocols, IPv6 and HTTPS rewrites, for instance, that keeps you fast and secure. IPv6 is widely used on mobile, so that's going to improve your mobile performance right away. But you can also automatically get configured to use HTTP2 when available, which will give you a 30% performance boost. And that's it. You don't have to do anything else. So end-to-end, Cloudflare is speeding up every request to your site. Performant DNS, caching, content optimization, load balancing, and more. That's the performance angle. For security, not only DDoS protection, but Cloudflare is a web application firewall powered by a massive IP reputation database that updates for everybody. And one of the ways they do this, and I really want to emphasize this, they are happy to have free customers. Yes, there is a free tier of Cloudflare protection for your blog, your personal site. The reason they do that is because you add to their firewall rules. Every time you use a firewall rule, they'll examine it and expand it to others if it's something useful. Cloudflare's 24/7 security team is always watching for new 0 days, deploying firewall rules to block exploit attempts. It makes you more secure. Of course, reliability, too. With their managed DNS service, it's the fastest, it's the most reliable DNS in the world. It also provides you with flexibility. No lock-in for your cloud provider. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, a combination of public and hybrid. Cloudflare works for them all and lets you easily switch between them. And using Cloudflare gives you the business the opportunity to use more than one cloud provider. So there's no lock-in. It is so easy to set up. And, of course, if you're hit with a DDoS attack, do it now, but you can always run to Cloudflare and say, help me, help me. Prices range from free to $20 a month to $200 a month, and they're custom plans for enterprise. And I want to encourage you to go to cloudflare.com/twit, because they've got a great deal for you right now. They're offering Twit listeners, and this is only for people who are hearing this ad right now on Windows Weekly. Go to cloudflare.com, I'm typing it in right now, /twit, and you can sign up for a free online chat session with their really top support engineer, Jameson Sundell. He's fantastic, and probably the best at explaining what Cloudflare does, how it does it, and what you can, how you can use it to make your site more performant, more reliable, to know more about what's going on in your site, etc., etc., etc. Cloudflare.com/twit. We think the world of it. We know you will, too. Let me turn on the microphone. Is he on Skype 3? For Rich Turner. We're very pleased to welcome. And we did note your tweet, Rich. And
I thought that was quite creative.
I'll let one of you guys do the honors. Introduce our guest.
I'll introduce him.
Yep.
Rich Turner's official title is Senior Program Manager at Microsoft, but he's best known on the web, I'd say, for being Mr. Bash.
Which isn't as bad as it sounds.
It's not as bad as it sounds.
It's not like Mr. Bill. Oh no, Mr. Bash, not like that.
No. If you've seen anything about stuff Microsoft's been doing with Bash and Windows 10 around the console, things around the console, Bash, Windows subsystem for Linux, he's one of the main guys who's been involved with this. So it's awesome to get him on Windows Weekly.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for having me on as well. I was hoping to come on and chat with you guys around this time last year after we just announced Bash at Build for the first time. And I know that Peter took my stead, essentially, and did a great job of that, so that's fine. But it's really exciting to be talking with you guys. I've been a listener for many years, so it's
nice.
fun to be online with you all.
Fantastic. You guys have any questions?
Explain yourself.
Yeah,
what have you done?
Yeah, I know what Thurrott wants to know. Basically,
what have you done to my Windows?
Why? What have you done?
I think that's probably a permanent
the why
fixture,
is
really,
good.
isn't it?
The why is actually a great place to start, because a lot of people are like, why did Microsoft bring Bash to Windows? Why?
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, to give you some context, I actually came back to Microsoft Leap Day last year, February 29th. I came back to Microsoft for this feature. I was at Microsoft from 2000 through 2010, working on a variety of products, including Windows Communication Foundation and what used to be called Indigo, and on .NET Framework and Visual Studio and various other things. And for the last 6 years or so, I've been out in the real world, working with clients all over the country and on a variety of platforms and technologies. And learned a huge amount over the last 6 years in particular. And then the beginning of last year, I was in the middle of building yet another startup and getting very frustrated with Windows and how awkward it was in many ways to use a lot of open source tools in particular on Windows. A lot of them work very well, but a lot of them, the packages and the libraries that you bring into those projects, they're oftentimes built to run on Linux itself and expect the Linux file system to be laid out in a particular way, expect certain behaviors. And when you try and run those things on Windows, a lot of them fail, which is a painful experience. So I actually tweeted just over a year ago and said, hey, who owns the Windows command line? I need to unload. And someone tweeted me privately and said, hey, you need to mail this guy. So I mailed this guy and said, really sorry for the spam mail, and brain dumped on him for about 3 pages. And he replied to me and said, I agree with everything you've said. Come for lunch. So I came for lunch, and he told me about what Microsoft was doing around investing in a team to actually own the console for the first time in many years. And also then said, there's one other thing. We have the ability to run Linux binaries on Windows. And I nearly fell off my chair at the time when we dug into what it meant, because it was so exciting that I would no longer have to run a VM running Linux alongside my Windows development tools. I'd actually be able to run those tools directly on my Windows machine alongside all my Windows development tools, my Windows productivity tools, and I'd be able to run everything essentially in one environment. And he said, "Oh, we're looking for a PM to come in and help us drive some of this stuff if you're interested." And it's like, oh my God, it's like a red rag to a bull, right? So the startup immediately got shelved, and I was applying for positions and going through interview loops and all the rest of it. For some reason, they decided to hire me, and it's been a crazy, crazy ride this last 12 plus months to go from I don't know how we managed to keep this thing under wraps. But there were very, very few leaks.
I'll tell you how. Nobody could possibly believe that you were doing it. Even if they heard the rumor, they went, "Oh, that's insane."
Right.
Exactly. I mean, I thought when I came in for lunch with my now manager, I thought he was joking. I thought he was completely putting my leg. And when I came in, for the first 2 weeks, I didn't actually have a laptop because there was a screw up in ordering. So I was using my personal Surface to just to conduct meetings and email. I couldn't even get an internal build on this thing because they're all signed and secured. And about 2 weeks later, I got a work laptop. I got a work Surface, and immediately put on the latest build out of the branch that the team working on WSL work from. And just this was on a Friday. Went home and just freaked out all weekend with how incredibly awesome this thing was. Even though it was pretty rough around the edges at the time, there were quite a few things that didn't work. There were quite a few gaps. But you could see where this thing was going, and if it just meant that we could just keep piling on bug fixing and expanding the breadth and the depth of the Linux features that we could support, this thing could turn into something amazing. And I actually tweeted and said, finally getting to run the latest builds of what would become Windows anniversary update. And I think you guys, when you see this, are going to freak out. And then Hanselman saw me tweet and retweeted and said, "I know what Rich is working on. This is going to change everything." And we promptly got a slam down then from Microsoft PR saying, "You guys shut up." Keep the noise
remember
down.
seeing that.
Keep your enthusiasm contained.
Exactly. And we didn't even leak what this thing was, right? Even we managed to keep it in internal.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. Just going out at build, seeing this announcement go out. The entire team, we actually took over a meeting room. We decided we weren't going to do any work for that morning while the announcements are going out. And we were all literally manning Twitter, manning Reddit and Facebook and various other places, ready for the onslaught of questions. And holy cow, what? Is this thing real? Is it a VM? What is this? What's it for? And so on. And so we took over a meeting, and we were just hammering away trying to answer as many questions as we could. But essentially where this whole thing came from basically came from the experience that I was having before joining Microsoft again, with trying to run a lot of open source tools and technologies and platforms on Windows. You know, Windows and Linux, Unix world have different philosophies around how file systems should work and how processes should work and what a shell should look like and how these things should work together. So trying to glue these quite different, disparate worlds together is quite tricky. So we've still got a lot of work to do yet, but we've made some amazing strides in this last year, going from an early technology preview, which is what WSL was back in Anniversary Update. We've been releasing almost weekly for the last sort of 9 months or so through the Insiders program, and every week we would introduce some new syscalls, some new capabilities, each one of which would then unlock maybe a dozen tools. Suddenly Java lit up, suddenly NPM lit up, suddenly Maven lit up, and then Apache ran, and then SSHD ran, and all of these things started lighting up quite rapidly. And then we announced the Creators Update, launched the Creators Update last week, and I posted a blog post on what's new in Creators Update for WSL. And that one tweet announcing that blog post is my biggest tweet by far, according to Twitter Analytics, which indicates that the target audience that we're building this thing for are really interested and intrigued by what this is. And it seems to be making a lot of people very happy, which is great.
So the chat room, almost to a man, wants some to understand the distinction between Bash Shell, PowerShell, when you should use which. Why didn't you just make it PowerShell? that kind of thing.
Right. So that's a great place to leap off. Actually, let's just define a few terms, because I know in the Windows world it's not as clear and evident to a lot of Windows users what happens when you fire up a Windows command line application. If we start there, then we can sort of piece together where the different shells fit in, and we'll figure out what the landscape looks like. So in Windows, if you go to your start menu, you type CMD or command line, you get offered this command line shell, and you click the tile, and up pops a console window. It looks like DOS, is what a lot of non-technical people in particular say. It's a black screen with a thin border, and you type commands in and stuff happens. So the actual application that owns the drawing of the text on the screen, owns the window frame, the black window that we draw the text onto, and it's that window that handles keyboard input, mouse input, and so on. And that application in the Mac world is called terminal. The terminal and console is a common term used for both. It comes from the railway analogy from many years ago. Essentially, the terminal is the end of the train line, where the users interact, and then command line applications essentially daisy chain one off the other, like train carriages after that. So when you fire up any command line application, if you run ping from the Windows run key, that actually launches a Windows console and attaches that console to an instance of the ping executable, which is a command line executable. So when you launch CMD, which is the shell, the thing that understands what you type in and what to send to the screen in response, when you type into CMD or into PowerShell, which also is surprisingly a shell, which is a command line application that accepts keyboard input and in response to what you type, squirts stuff back onto the screen. So console draws the stuff on the screen, handles the keyboard input. CMD and PowerShell are shells, just like Bash is, just like Fish and ZSH and the variety of shells in the Unix world. So the console application itself, I actually PM that as well. The team are literally just the other side of the wall from me here, who are literally giving that application its biggest overhaul in more than 30 years. It was one of the first applications ever built on Windows to run on top of the NT kernel, because it was the first thing that they needed in order to be able to interact with the operating system when they started building it. So it's been around for a long time. In fact, one of our devs has a pull request pending, which when it gets pulled in, will remove a chunk of code that's older than he is. It makes me feel very depressed. These grey whiskers are just frightening. Yeah. So that console is getting a lot of overhaul. Traditionally, it was never built to support Linux VT sequences, which is the embedded codes that you embed in a stream of text to say, hey, now turn the foreground color red, now turn the foreground color green, now turn the background color blue, and so on. So it was never built to support those inline VT sequences, which the Linux world uses extensively and which the Windows world doesn't. In Windows, you typically call an API against the console to turn the foreground color red, etc., while you're writing text out. So just slightly different approaches, similar end result. So the console's getting a big overhaul, and a lot of that overhaul was driven by the fact that if we're going to have this Linux subsystem inside your operating system now, wouldn't it be great if we could actually render the UI correctly? And so we've done a ton of work to support a bunch of VT sequences. A lot of the major ones are there now. A few rough edges to sort out yet in future releases. But it's getting really good now. We still don't do tabs. We have some interesting work going on to solve that problem at some point. But we've got a lot of work lined up to really bring the console up to a modern terminal that application developers and IT pros and geeks around the world would like to be able to use. So that's the terminal console itself. And then, as I said, it connects to a CMD instance, a command shell instance, which is the traditional Windows command shell, or it connects to a Bash, to a PowerShell instance, which is the PowerShell shell as we know and love. And then there's the Bash shell as well, running in Linux, and we can connect directly to that and handle its input-output on behalf of the application. So using these tools, we can now have CMD running alongside PowerShell, running alongside a WSL instance, and can even interoperate between them as well, which was a really, really key scenario for us. One of the when I was building my last startup, one of the things I was continually having to do when I was running Linux in a VM alongside my Windows apps on the same machine, trying to get files back and forth across that boundary was quite a headache. Whereas on Bash on Windows, because Linux processes essentially run alongside your existing Windows processes and run on top of the NT kernel, your Linux processes actually get to see your C drive, your D drive, your physical fixed drives in your machine. Can actually see those drives and can see the contents of them. So you can share files that you want to work on both in Windows with maybe a Visual Studio or a graphical editor of some kind, and maybe command line tools running in the Linux side of things that might build, test, automate the creation and packaging of your thing. You can actually share the same files with both environments, which is just a productivity boon. It's amazing when you start using that thing.
I think I saw you quoted recently saying that Microsoft might open up the Windows subsystem for Linux to other Linux distros. Right now it's tied to Ubuntu, right?
So it's only very loosely tied to Ubuntu. And to give those guys a major shout out, the Canonical guys have been so much fun to work with for the last year or so. And major kudos for them for taking that crazy leap before we launched to support running Linux on Windows. I mean, holy cow, right? So major shout out to them. They're a great bunch, and we've had a whale of a time working with them. But to make it clear, the WSL infrastructure, Windows Subsystem for Linux, essentially describes the chunk of new functionality that we've added to the Windows NT kernel that exposes itself as if it was a Linux kernel. It exposes all of the functions and the structures that the Linux kernel interface exposes, upon which you then run user mode applications. So when you run Bash itself, it's a user mode application. It talks to the Linux kernel, and they go back and forth. In building WSL, however, we specifically built it to be as distro agnostic as the Linux kernel itself is. So so we built it to support the standard Linux kernel API, essentially the system call interface that exposes the capabilities of the kernel to user mode processes above. Because we always planned on making this thing eventually support other distros, we've still got some work to do before we can actually get there. But ultimately, we've tried to take as few dependencies as possible on Ubuntu specifically to be able to get this thing up and running. We had to be pragmatic just to get it out the door to start with, and then start figuring out what works and what doesn't. So we do have a couple of assumptions in there that this is an Ubuntu derived distro, but we're trying to minimize those dependencies so that at some point maybe we'll be able to support other distros as well.
That's cool. Yeah.
And the community themselves have piled on this, right? They've figured out how to shoehorn other open source distros on top of WSL, which has been so much fun for us to watch. We were astonished that it happened so quickly. But one of the Red Hat developers took a Fedora instance and literally just deleted the Ubuntu files that we expand out from an Ubuntu distro and just copied his Fedora files on top. And a surprising amount of stuff worked. There were a few rough edges, and we learned some syscalls that we were missing, and we've fixed a few of those, so it's actually a bit more stable now. But it's pretty clunky, that experience. So we'd like to do something better for that in the future, but that's a little way off yet.
So how complete is it? I mean, you obviously don't support all the system calls. How is there a percentage, or how would you characterize it?
So that is a great question. It's something that we pondered long and hard when we were figuring out how to take this thing out and when we should take it out. There was talk just over a year ago when I came back. I came into the sort of latter half of the conversations, but there was some talk about, do we take this out into public now, or do we keep it in-house and polish it a bit more before we release it to the public? And the reality is that the Linux mantra for its API, for the Linux kernel API, is never break user mode. which means that you can never remove functionality. So even if an API falls out of favor or becomes superseded by a better implementation of something, the old API has to stay there, otherwise you break stuff. So that's why the Linux kernel interface has some duplication in it, and it's not clear. There's no definitive list that says these functions are fully supported, these ones are deprecated, no one's using these things anymore. So the question is, so if we don't know who's not using APIs, who is using APIs? And it's kind of tricky to figure that out broadly across all of the distros and all of the distro derivatives. It's kind of tricky to figure out what's being used and what isn't. So we had to try and find out what are the APIs that are actually being used. And we basically do that by logging whenever a syscall fails, a syscall that we have implemented fails, or if we get asked to execute a syscall that we haven't yet implemented, we throw an error, and then we capture those errors and we tally them all up into a bar graph essentially of all the syscalls, and the most frequently failing things are the next things we've got to fix.
You can figure that anything you take out, there's one guy who uses it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you'll hear from him.
It's just like Windows, right? I mean, you take something out of Windows and suddenly you get people screaming with their hair on fire that, oh, you just brought down my production oil rig or whatever, which is less than pleasant. So in Windows as well, we try not to break stuff. We're pretty insanely focused on backward compatibility in Windows. But Linux is a very, very similar mindset in many ways from the kernel's perspective. So we started by running as many tools as we could, but we figured out, to give you some idea, the team is small. So the team working on the console right now is 2 people. Wow. The team working on the user mode features, the user side of all the installation, configuration, management of WSL, that's 2 people. We've got 7 devs working on WSL itself, and a couple of dev leads and overhead like me that just sort of walk around with magic hands and stuff. So we've got probably in total about 10, maybe 11 developers who are working on console and bash all up. And we'd rather have those guys actually fixing syscalls and improving the features and making this thing support more and more tools than running tests on their machines and trying to figure out what's working and not. So this is why back in March last year, we said, do we keep this in-house and polish it a bit more or release it? We said, we've got to release it because we cannot scale to use the astonishing variety and plethora of tools that the open source community and the Linux community run on top of Linux. I mean, crazy numbers of languages and platforms, and there are people using Lisp and Erlang and C and C++ and Java and Scala and all of these things. There's no way that we could find the time to install, learn how to use, exercise those things properly and so on. So we took a very bold decision, I think, last year to say, hey, this is rough and ready. And when we recorded the original announcement video for this, we were really open and said, there are going to be gaps. There are going to be things that don't work. There will be things that break. Expect that, but tell us what breaks. We opened up a public GitHub repo for people to file issues on us, so that we could kind of keep track of what people were seeing and how many people were affected by things. And the community has been absolutely astounding. We have, I think, one of the best communities I've ever found, who have been just monumental in helping us find, fix, understand, diagnose these things. A lot of our devs inside Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft's a huge company, right? 120,000 people, something on those lines. A lot of us came from Unix in our earlier careers. A lot of people have very recently come to the company from a Unix background. So we've got quite a lot of Unixy, Linuxy background in the company. But even so, I don't think many of us would class ourselves as Linux experts, so to speak. So we've just been flabbergasted and amazed at how helpful the community's been, helping us make sure that our understanding of how Linux should behave in certain cases, and how the APIs in particular should behave in certain cases, and what their expectation is of when you do this, Linux should do this. has been just phenomenal, and a major thank you to our entire community who's helped us do this. People who reach out to me on Twitter several times a day to report issues or ask whether certain things are supported. I often direct a lot of those people to go file bugs on us because oftentimes they're things we've never even seen before. So a major thank you to those people because we couldn't have built this thing to the degree of quality that it is today in the Creators Update without all of your help.
I have a listener question for you. Judah Z.
Okay.
Bash question for Rich. Are there any plans to allow direct access to devices like SD card readers from Bash? And if yes, when?
Now, it's funny that you ask that. So just before I came on, I was listening to you guys chatting, and I think the point was made that the Windows Insider machine has started up again last week and spat out a build. And in last week's build, we've only literally yesterday posted a couple of blog posts on this, but we've actually, the WSL team, in between finishing the code for RS2, the Creators Update, and moving forward, the team literally had zero downtime. They committed the last change for RS3 and just kept plowing forward. So they've been powering ahead for the last few weeks while the RS2 build system completes, and then the new RS3, the next version of Windows build system, spins up. And the result of the last few weeks worth of work has just arrived in the Insiders builds. So in last week's Insiders builds, we actually shipped support for mounting USB storage devices. So if you have a USB stick that's formatted with anything that Windows can understand, so FAT, exFAT, FAT32, NTFS, then we can mount those drives. Right now, I know a lot of users are going to go, oh, but what about my EXT formatted drives? And we don't support those right now because we don't have a Windows driver for EXT drives. We would love to. It's just a matter of time and resources. As I said, we're a small team. We understand the need, however, and please pile onto our user voice and keep telling us that so we can bump that requirement up the priority list if it's important to you. Along with that, we also added serial communication support. So any COM port that's exposed to through your machine, you can now use to, for example, build a Raspberry Pi image and blow it down to a Raspberry Pi device or many other IoT devices. Potentially also communicate with phones and development kits from a variety of hardware manufacturers. So we've already started to see, and these two features, the mounting of removable drives, USB drives in particular, and serial communications, were two of the most asked for features that we had on our list. And we're excited to get the first implementations of those out. Please, again, file bugs on us if you notice that we're doing some things wrong. We'd love to polish those things and make them really solid by the time we release the next OS build.
I have a question for you about something announced at DockerCon this week.
Paul, don't you have any questions, Paul?
I do have a question.
No, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I'm just dominating.
No, I'm just teasing Paul. He's
Paul,
strangely silent.
Think of a couple. Even Mary Jo talked about Xbox last week, right? So
I did, guys. Like, come on.
You just step your game up, Thurrott. Come on.
Strangely silent.
Now, I wanted to ask you about Linux Kit that was announced this week at DockerCon, because I'm kind of intrigued by this thing, right? It's like a mini Linux system, like kind of a self-contained subsystem of Linux. How do you guys see that playing with or competing with what you're doing with Bash on Windows 10?
So that's actually a great question. I was having a chat with one of my colleagues an hour ago about that very subject. The way that we position ourselves, and we often get a similar question with, well, there's Hyper-V, and I could run a full, proper, real, compatible, high-performance Linux VM in there, and then there's Bash on Windows. How do I make a decision about what do I do where? And it's similar with the Docker container stuff. WSL doesn't allow you to run containers themselves on WSL right now, but you can run the Docker client to communicate with a remote host, even if that host is Docker for Windows running on your machine locally, or it's a Docker host running in a cloud or on a virtual server somewhere, for example. So from our perspective, WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux, and Bash on Windows are, and we are dedicating all of our time and resources to making that environment really, really rock for developers. So this is a development environment. It is for development. It is not for running your production MySQL instance on top of. We're not built for that scenario. We have a lot of work yet to do to make sure our performance is much better than it is right now, in particular for disk I/O, and we're doing some amazing work with the core storage team in the operating system to make some of those improvements over the next few releases. But for Bash WSL, we're really all about the developer experience, getting your code working, testing it, debugging it, making sure that your code works, and writing that code and completing your features. So Hyper-V, on the other hand, is all about production workloads. It's all about housing, densely housing multiple, potentially heterogeneous, homogeneous operating systems on a single physical box. And that's really where the Docker story has a much, much better place. So the stuff that came out yesterday with Docker Kit, the support for Docker Kit from Windows comes out of the Hyper-V team. For us, we talk about if you're going to create a Docker package and develop an application that goes into a package, do that. You can do a lot of that from within Bash WSL, and you can build your Docker package in Bash WSL, and then you deploy it using Docker client to a host somewhere, either on your physical box here locally, or to a remote host somewhere else. So they're pretty complementary, but two totally different environments tuned for totally different scenarios.
Okay.
Still no questions from Paul.
I do have a question.
And
yes, I have a question.
Why have you done this to Windows? No.
What have you done to my
I guess
Windows?
the thing I'm wondering, kind of a year later, it seems like maybe there'll be more announcements at Build about what the plans are for the future, but has there been a difference between what users have been doing in Bash on Windows versus what the expectation was, right? Like you half answered it a little earlier. You were talking about the developer bent, and it's not for running, SQLite on top of Windows or whatever. But I mean, obviously people are filing bugs, and you're getting some hint there from usage. But I mean, has the main point of the usage, has it been any different from what your expectation was?
No, it's actually been pretty close to what we expected. When we launched last year, back in March timeframe last year, April timeframe last year, we were fully expecting that some people would just kick the tires and give it a poke and go, ooh, there's lots of rough edges there. There's sharp, pointy things. I don't like stabbing myself with sharp, pointy things. And we fully expected that because, as I said, we were pretty open and transparent that we were not yet done with this thing. So back when we first released, I remember one of the first major bugs that hit us was that we had some wonky handling of if your machine's DHCP address changed, then we weren't routing the updates correctly to WSL, and so it didn't know that your IP address had changed, and so it had network resolution issues. We fixed that in like the first week. But there were rough edges that NPM wouldn't work correctly because it would try and enumerate your network connections to find out what IP addresses you had open, and it couldn't find them because we hadn't yet implemented that function or those functions. The Python would run into issues, and pip, and so on and so on. Java would struggle to run because we didn't handle some of the memory allocation mechanisms that Java needed. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So early on, we fully expected people to poke, to prod. The core Linux tools, things like sed, grep, awk, and so on, the Bash console itself, they work pretty well. But a few glitches here and there, we nail those pretty quickly. What we've seen, though, over the last 9 months or so in particular, ever since anniversary update was released, is we've seen a significant swing from poking and prodding this thing going, that's kind of interesting, to nowadays we're seeing people literally spend 8-10 hours a day in Bash building code running all of their complete CI build system for big complex applications. Lots of people with big Git repos. We need to make disk I/O a bit quicker so that those things don't take quite as long, but they'll work. And it's gone from being it's kind of a funky thing. Look, I can run Fortune Cow, say, and have a little cow on the screen reading my fortune cookie of the day, which is my go-to demo. It's such a crowd pleaser. We've gone from playing with things like that to building all of MySQL and running its entire test suite. Right, from source. I will tell you. Hey, I'm going to build my company's product on top of this thing. It's amazing.
We've actually seen this. I mentioned this in passing maybe a week or two ago, but our main web dev was getting very frustrated with Windows 10 because all the tools he needed were on the Linux side, and he was running it in a VM and it didn't like it, and he had literally just decided to blow Windows away. And then he contacted Brad and I, and he said, "Hey, have you guys ever looked at this bash thing in Windows 10?" And it literally made the difference between him leaving Windows just to get work done. And now he's sticking with it. And he just announced to us the other day, he's very excited about this. Like he actually thinks this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to Windows. So I have seen it.
That's awesome. And that's seriously fabulous to hear. You have not, I mean, I've worked on products at Microsoft before and at other companies as well that, I've really enjoyed working on them, or I've really enjoyed working with the team on the product. It's been so much fun. This is just off the charts. This is just so much fun to work on. To bring something so insanely crazy as running Linux binaries on Windows. It still blows my mind every day when I wake up going, are we really doing this? So it's just so awesome to be able to do that, to scratch our own backs, to work with a truly phenomenal team. And from your own description, I hear people telling exactly that story at least 10 times a day on Twitter alone, let alone the emails that we get from people and from customers saying, we were seriously thinking about abandoning Windows as a development platform because it just didn't allow us to run the now broad suite of tools that we have across Windows and Linuxy stuff. We want to build on Windows, but we have to test and host and debug on Linux, and it's too painful an experience. And when they start using Bash on Windows and go, holy cow, this stuff just works, just like I'm sitting in a Linux box, but I can do it alongside all my existing Windows productivity tools, that's just a game changer for a lot of people. This feedback, this kind of feedback, the stuff we hear from Twitter from the community, all the GitHub issues that we see filed and we get to fix those, and people say, this was the last thing that blocked my entire CI system from building our entire company's product chain on Bash on Windows. It's just pure gravy. It's awesome.
Yeah, no, that's great.
I've got the chat window open here. I'm trying to decipher the stream of text.
Yeah,
I gave up doing that about 8 years ago.
You're brave, Rich. That's brave.
Yeah.
I can run. I don't have to use Bash, right? I can use Z Shell or TCSCH or
Absolutely. So you can run whatever you like.
I'm a Fish fan, so I'd like to.
Right.
Yeah.
I've actually got Fish and ZSH on my machine here, and I flick back between them when showing demos and things. And it freaks people out when you're sitting and bashing. Oh yeah, but you can't run Fish, so I'm not going to use it. Fish, boom. A colorful fish thing, and like, okay then. Now I'm paying attention. So yeah, I mean, the ultimate goal is if you can run it on Ubuntu, and it's something that's a tool that a developer might need, or a geek or an IT pro might need in order to get their job done, we want to be able to run it. The naming of this stuff has been interesting. Let me say that. We were wondering what to call this stuff. So the Windows subsystem for Linux, the underlying technology, the deep down stuff, it actually doesn't contain any Linux at all. It's an independent implementation of the Linux binary interface.
I think that was a source of confusion initially, because everybody said, "Oh, Ubuntu, it's Bash and Ubuntu. Oh, you're running Ubuntu, but there's no Linux kernel there at all."
There's no Linux kernel
WSL. Now, is it an emulator?
So So I tend to say no, and
it's more like wine,
is
right?
Is it an emulator? Is it a simulator? Is it real or what? Depends on your definition of those things.
Right.
For me, an emulator is something pretending to be something else. That may be a simulator. I'm not sure. It depends on your definition. But we see it as a real deal re-implementation of the Linux syscall interface.
Much so like wine puts Windows on Linux.
Yeah. So it doesn't really emulate Windows like it runs in some virtual separated Lisp machine or anything like that. It's literally the calls come from the Linux user mode processes. They call down into the kernel receives the call and then does whatever it's asked. So there is a Linux syscall for opening a file. You pass in a path to a file and it hands back a handle to that file, which you can then use to read or write to and from that file. So we implemented the open function, and we call down into the Windows file open function to make that happen. We don't re-implement all of the file semantics because we don't need to. We've got an entire kernel beneath us already. So we just essentially map that call back and forth. There are some things, however, that Windows doesn't even have a notion of, the way that, for example, Linux expresses and exposes devices. Windows does things very differently. We have the same information, but we might need to emulate some behavior or copy or re-implement some behavior so that Windows is returning the right stuff when called. But ultimately, it's that layer. If we can build that layer to be as compatible as possible with the Linux system call interface, then pretty much anything you can run in Linux should, in theory, run on top of us.
Except GUIs, or can you?
So that's a really one. So
so the
famous Redmond right. So we aren't focusing any effort on making X GUI or desktop applications run on top of WSL. As I said, we're a small team. We're focusing all of our effort right now on making sure we support the broad gamut of developer tools that developers need to run in a command line interface in order to build and run and test their stuff. A natural byproduct of us doing this is that we will eventually start implementing syscalls that allow X GUI applications to run on top of us. We do nothing to check if you're running X and try and block you or any of that nonsense. We just say, if you're Linux code, we want to run you. So a natural byproduct of broadening and deepening our syscall interface implementation is that some X stuff started running. So about 3-4 weeks after we launched, there was a guy on Twitter who said, "Oh, look at this! I'm running X eyes on top of WSL." And the little application that has the 2 eyeballs that follow your mouse around. And then Xterm started running, and then someone got Firefox running, and a few months later, someone got the Ubuntu Unity desktop to run inside an X server on top of WSL. And we were like, whoa. We'd not even thought about going near that breadth and that level of sophistication of an application. And someone took the time over his weekend to go and get it running, and I had to do surprisingly little to make it work. A few rough edges, those got shaved off as we continue to proceed forward with improving our syscall implementations. And now a surprising number of things actually do work. Although if they fail, please file a bug on us, because we want to know if it's a syscall we have to implement. But we don't support or we won't divert effort to go and fix something for a GUI app at the cost of implementing something for command line tool.
How about Kersey's stuff? You do that, right?
Yeah. So anything text-based, we are all over. So if you've ever seen Midnight Commander, which is Miguel de Casa's first ever open source project, where he built Midnight Commander as a Linux implementation of Norton Commander, if you remember back in those days. And Midnight Commander now runs beautifully on top of WSL. We use it quite a lot in demos, and it turns out to be a very useful tool when trying to navigate through file systems and stuff. But it's amazing to see things like that come back to life again after, I could hear Paul almost gasp in the background there with horror.
I'm looking it up.
Such things are still in wide use, and they're still very, very widely used.
Oh, I use MC all the time.
Right.
And top, I use GTop,
HTOP.
which is HTOP rather,
Yep.
yeah, which is
Yep.
Kersey's implementation. So,
and Cowsay, don't forget Cowsay as
yep,
well. Yeah.
Cowsay, gotta have Cowsay. So people
Yeah.
are asking about POSIX compliance. You're not aiming to POSIX compliance, I presume.
Well, the Linux ABI, the Linux system call interface is an extension to POSIX, right? So
Yeah, I mean,
POSIX,
Linus always said we're aiming for POSIX compliance.
yes, and POSIX includes a bunch of other stuff outside of just the syscalls that expose the kernel to user mode. It also describes how a file system should work and how processes should work and the behavior of an environment that's POSIX compliant as much as the runtime environment that supports the execution of that code. So we essentially, as far as we're concerned, if we're implementing the majority of the syscalls necessary to run these tools, if the thing that you're running on us is POSIX compliant from the behavioral environmental perspective, then we're probably fairly POSIX compliant. So if you want to run, the Linux file system, we actually built a driver into Windows to provide the Linux Bash environment with a file system that behaves, looks, feels, and acts just like the Linux file system. It actually sits on top of NTFS. So for each file, we essentially store additional metadata that describes, for example, Linux file system permissions, timestamps, and other metadata that is different between Windows files and Linux files. And so as far as Linux is concerned, when you drop into Bash, you may as well be on a native Linux box. You're running, you look at the root of your file system. It looks just like you would expect on an Ubuntu server. You navigate into etc, and you can start seeing settings. You navigate to your home. You can create folders. You can create symlinks. You can change ownership of files, and we honor all of the security semantics, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So from the perspective of someone sitting in Bash, they are literally sitting at Linux. The other thing that we do, though, to make interoperation with Windows easier is that we mount your physical drives under the MNT folder, the root MNT folder. So if you go to cd whack mnt whack c and then do an ls, you'll list your Windows C drive. And so you can from there go into your project folder and you can vim into and edit your source code. And then you can, if you're running tmux, for example, you can create a separate pane, and then in your separate pane, you can set up a file system watcher to automatically rebuild your thing every time you hit save in Vim. And you can sit there in Vim, coding away, hitting save, watching your thing rebuild, making sure you haven't broken anything, and be incredibly productive. And then if you wanted to, you could drop into, for example, Visual Studio Code, running in Windows, and edit the same files and watch the system rebuild every time you hit save. This is a common pattern for Node developers and developers using dynamic languages like Node and Ruby and things like that. So that ability to choose which are the tools that you want to use. Not everyone likes Vim. Some people like Emacs as well, and they're wrong. Vim is clearly I've actually got Hanselman on stage last year during Build. He, on the second day after the announcement, was doing a demo of Bash on Windows. It was the first time he demoed it, and it was just, he'd been freaking out for several weeks beforehand playing with this thing. And he did the classic demo of inside Bash on Windows, go into Vim, open up a file, make some changes, hit save, and then how do you get out of Vim? Oh, I can never remember. So close the console, opens up another console.
Oh, that's the way to do it.
A guy on Reddit created these.
Oh, wait a minute. I got to see what that says.
I wish I knew how to quit Vim.
Yeah, that's a standard. That's great.
That's awesome.
I wish I knew how to quit Vim. I wish I knew how to quit you.
So it's colon Q.
Q. Yep.
That's so funny.
That's awesome.
So I swapped him some Microsoft stickers for these stickers. He only had a small batch made, so I just love these. So Hanselman's getting one of these to stick on the front of his Surface, so he can remember how to get out of
A lot of people who are using this came from Cygwin, which is
yes.
So compare it to Cygwin.
So Cygwin, I mean, I've used Cygwin for decades.
Yeah,
it's an amazing tool. It really is. But essentially, what Cygwin is take the GNU tools, so sed, grep, awk, SSH, and so on, and recompile those tools as Windows applications. So if you install Cygwin and you use SSH from within Cygwin, you're actually running a Win32 command line application, which is based, 95% of it, 99% of it is OpenSSH code, but it's recompiled as a Windows application as opposed to a Linux binary application. So when you run that, you're actually running a Win32 app, just as if you were running ping in Windows or ipconfig or CMD itself. So the Cygwin tools integrate really nicely into Windows. So if you have build scripts and automation scripts and testing scripts and so on that you've written in Bash, a lot of times you can bring those scripts forward into Windows. You can run a lot of them within Cygwin. You might have to do some jiggery-pokery to change file system locations, because Cygwin doesn't completely mirror the default Linux file system layout, but it kind of tries to get there some of the time. So Cygwin's great if the only binary applications that you're running are Linux binary applications. The challenge with Cygwin is, what if you need to run a Ruby application that depends on a Ruby package, which is basically a wrapper around a Linux-only binary. And in that case, it falls apart because it can't run Linux binaries. Right?
Right.
So that's where WSL comes in.
Yep.
So in WSL, because we're running real Linux binaries, when you run that Ruby step and the Ruby application kicks up and it drags in the Ruby library, which is a wrapper around the native Linux binary, when it all calls, it calls through WSL and everything works fine because it's literally running in a Linux-like environment.
Right.
So there's slightly different tools for slightly different needs.
Right.
Cygwin's still great. I've still got it installed.
Really? You still use it? I mean, I feel like it's completely been replaced.
It's great because it's so close to Windows. I mean, it's literally Windows apps, right? So if I'm in Windows and I just want to SSH into something, I usually just drop into PowerShell and SSH. If I want to do the same thing from within Bash, I can also do it just as easily. It just depends. If I'm in PowerShell, I don't have to think about, oh, hang on, I'm going to SSH, and now I'm going to drop over to a Bash window and then SSH from there. I can literally just sit in CMD and Bash as well. Sit in PowerShell and SSH from there. There
were some complaints I remember about wget and some other programs that were kind of not non-standardly implemented.
So that was an interesting one. Yeah. So this is PowerShell. So
okay, right. So I can use. I just install apt-get install wget on the Bash command or the Windows on Linux.
And that's the normal wget.
Yeah. And that's the full wget.
Yeah.
Is there a collision? There's no collision. They're separate namespaces completely, right?
They're separate namespaces, okay. Yeah. So, actually, that's an interesting one. We'll come back to process interop in just a minute. In PowerShell, the thing that you're referring to with the naming collisions, essentially, refer to the fact that in PowerShell, by default, it defines a number of aliases for common Linux or Unix command line operations.
I can type ls and all that so I don't get confused.
That's it. And when you call ls, it's actually calling get dash child item, whatever it is. But you type ls and it gives you a file listing. The challenge with PowerShell is that although the name has been aliased, there's no mechanism right now to provide an aliasing of the command line arguments. So if you do ls -a, PowerShell doesn't know what to do with the -a.
Right.
Because PowerShell's arguments are expressed differently than and are different to the real Linux application.
Right.
So some people, when PowerShell last year went open source and went cross-platform, they actually have PowerShell on Linux now. Some people got frustrated that when they try and run some of their scripts within PowerShell, PowerShell can be kind of not compatible, but not too dissimilar from Bash in many ways. But when they tried to run their tools within PowerShell, and many people would type commands in from memory, and they go ls -agf and then they hit enter, it would go error. You go, what do you mean error? You got an ls, then ls this, and he goes, no, you can't do it that way. I just told you to ls this way. No, I'm not going to let you do that. It's So that's what drove that conversation, and because PowerShell is now open source and it's being developed in the open with the community, there's a bunch of work being done right now to figure out how to make that story a little bit better. From the Bash side of things, when you're sitting inside that Bash console, you're literally running Ubuntu. Right. So when you apt install foo, we don't even get involved in any of that. That's you talking to apt and whatever your apt servers are configured to go and look for. That's entirely up to Canonical and Ubuntu.
That always confuses me because I think of Ubuntu as including, Linux kernel. So
it does. It does. So, but remember, there's the full Ubuntu, the full sandwich essentially.
Yeah.
Which has the user mode stuff and the kernel.
Right.
And
that's just the user mode.
Yeah, this is just the user mode. So they also create a version of Ubuntu for cloud images for running inside Docker, because in Docker, your Docker instance runs and shares the kernel of the host. Right. So you don't need to ship a kernel with that because your host already has one. So they stand up these Docker instances on top of your host kernel, and you go to the races.
Yeah.
In just the same way with us, we provide the kernel. So when you download your Ubuntu instance on your machine on first run, all we download is the user mode side of stuff, and then we hook that up on top of WSL.
That makes sense. When it first came out, I know you had some trouble with tmux. That's been fixed, obviously.
Yep.
What is the most requested missing app at this point? Are you pretty complete?
So we're getting frighteningly complete. So up until last week, the two most frequently asked things other than tabs, and let's park the tabs conversation for a second. But for WSL itself, the two most frequently asked things were mounting of USB drives and serial communications. Lots and lots of people doing IoT. One of the other frequent asks we get is CUDA support. And it really surprised us actually how many people want CUDA support. So CUDA is an API for offloading compute onto your GPU. So it's used a lot by data analysts, machine learning people, big data analytics, big number crunching kind of stuff, DNA analysis and all this kind of business, where you want a thing that is really, really good at crunching vast amounts of math. You want to be doing that on your GPU, not on your CPU. We haven't got there yet. We've got more work to do before we get there. But we would like to at some point support CUDA and GPU compute operations, so that if you're running or building an application in R, you can actually do your computation analysis on top of using your GPU instead of forcing your CPU to have to do all the work.
Nice.
TensorFlow is another good example of that. Google's TensorFlow. Yeah. Right now we can run TensorFlow, but we can only compute on the CPU. Things get a lot quicker if you offer GPU. So there's things like that, but other than that, it's more shaving off of rough edges. I think now we've gotten to the point, and it comes back to Paul's question earlier. And thank you for the question, Paul. I'm very, very, very glad. It was a question of essentially how.
I know where you were on Twitter, Rich.
I dread it. You're a bit of a Photoshop maven, so my little Linux cup here, I think, is maybe a red rag to a bull for that. But the question ultimately is, how mature is this thing, right? How real is this environment as a daily driver Linux compatible environment you can really do real work in? And we see it as that now. We see that for the vast majority of core scenarios for Node developers, Ruby developers, web developers, Erlang developers, C developers, for a lot of those people, they'll now be able to use Bash WSL as a real-life, really compatible environment to work with. There are still a few gaps and missing things here and there, but the number of large items in our backlog has now decreased significantly. And as we push forward, we'll start to see more of that happen as well. So it becomes more of a polished thing. And then once we've gotten through most of the polished stuff and we support the vast majority of what we're targeting, then we can start looking for more interesting scenarios to go and attack.
We're almost done with our hour.
I know. He actually was going to do 30, so thanks for doing extra.
Golly.
No problem. It's more of a challenge to shut me up than keep me going, to be honest. Ask my team; they'll tell you.
Any final questions before we?
I have a question for you, actually.
Yes.
Leo?
You blogged a little while ago saying you were building a free BSD machine.
Yeah, I'm using it, but I'm using it with Linux. It turned out BSD on a desktop was not as simple as I was hoping. I'm comfortable with, the portage and BSD. I owe you a follow-up. Not you personally, but I owe people a follow-up. Yeah, well, I'm chagrined to admit it because I was really hopeful, and I ordered from a FreeBSD integrator a really nice box.
Right.
But man, it's not. It's so funny because Linux really is at this point so mature that it's fairly simple to get any PC running Linux.
Right.
Much more challenging.
And it's funny. We talked earlier about cultures. And how the Windows world has a different culture and a different perspective when it comes to architectures and file systems and so on. In the Linux world, there's the difference in culture then between the Linux world and the Unix world. And should you ever include precompiled binaries in the distro? It's all of that stuff as well. And
that's shifted. It's interesting how many people in FreeBSD and other BSDs use precompiled binaries.
Right.
You get tired of watching that screen fill with GCC commands.
Yep. I mean, some people love it. I know people who live all day long in FreeBSD and NetBSD and OpenBSD. And I used to be a big BSD guy back in the day, but that was a different time, and it was for a different scenario. I was using BSD from a much more narrow scenario. Right. So once you got it built, and you're typically running either on a dedicated box or in a VM, and you leave it alone, and it does its thing amazingly well.
Well, that's what I was hoping for, is just to get this really rock-solid system that would do everything I wanted it to do. And it turned out hardware compatibility really was the bugaboo.
Yes. And drivers are always a challenge. I mean, we haven't had enough time in Windows drivers, right? Yeah. So I can only imagine the challenges of trying to get hardware manufacturers to provide open source drivers or partially open source maybe. And
well, this box has an NVIDIA card in it. It has a M.2 hard drive. It has Wi-Fi. When I told the guys I wanted Wi-Fi, they literally froze. It was like Wi-Fi, huh? So
the irony is that a lot of router manufacturers, Wi-Fi router manufacturers, use BSD under the hood.
Right, sure.
But they're again built very specifically for a narrow platform. Yeah. Rather than some random card that you install from somewhere. I still
a goal to get it running, but it's just as my day-to-day desktop, it turned out to be much easier to use Linux, in the long run. So
awesome. Okay. Sigh, but you never say never, right?
I will. You're right. I owe everybody a follow-up because I was with great gusto and hope expecting to be able. I thought this would be a fairly easy process, and I bought all the books on ZFS, and oh man, I was ready. But about 3 weeks later, I'm thinking, Linux is looking awfully good right now.
Yes,
Rich, it's really been.
I wish I had the time to do it.
Yeah, I wish I did too. And that's really the other problem is, you can get stuff done, or you can get a BSD box working. Rich, I'm thrilled that we could get you on. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Really great. And
awesome.
Thank you.
And next time there's a beer up, we'll have to see if we can get an excuse to come down and visit with you.
That's going to happen very soon. So
I suspect there'll be many of those. Are you going to be at Build, Rich?
Yeah.
So there's the thing. So I'm actually going to OSCON. So back in November, when the OSCON call for papers went out, I submitted a crazy idea for a talk, cheekily titled, "Is that the sound of hell freezing over? Linux applications running on Windows?" And they accepted it, and I thought, oh, okay then. But by that time, we didn't know when build was. The build planning wasn't complete yet. So then several weeks later, the build announce goes out. And it's, well, you lot are going to be in Seattle while I'm down in Austin eating barbecue and talking to the guys at OSCON. So that'll be just as much fun. But yeah, some of my colleagues will be here at Build doing a talk on Bash WSL as well. Plus, we'll have an expo stand, and I'll be down at OSCON. So if you're in the Austin area, then come down and see us there as well.
Well, and thanks for.
Too bad we're going to miss you.
Thanks for making this happen, because I think I think you're right. I think it's very good for Microsoft. It opened the world up to a whole bunch of people who wanted to use Windows but had to use a Unix.
This isn't your dad's Microsoft anymore, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Nope. It really is. Thank you, Rich. Rich Turner,
yes, thank you.
Senior Product Manager, talking about Bash on Windows and the Windows console. Now, speaking of consoles, I have to mouse over. Well, I think there's a way to remove you, Rich, with a simple click of a mouse. If I just push this, they make it seem so easy. These engineers push this button right here.
Colon.
No, I wish it were. You know, if we're a command line, I could do it really easily. Thank you, Rich. Take care. All right. Ooh, look at that. They've zipped into boom. There's only 2 now, and then there were 2.
Yep.
So we can go right to the back of the book. We have no ad for this moment. So Paul, why don't you kick things off with your tip of the week?
So Microsoft supposedly just released the build sessions list, but as people are noticing, it's not there. So I tweeted a link. That came from Microsoft. So I guess stay tuned. That will come out soon. So there's your tip. Someday soon, you'll be able to see what you can do at Build. Separate from that, I have
the OnePlus 3T.
Yeah. So I spent the past week with this phone, and I have to say this thing performs better than the Pixel XL. I did a bunch of side-by-side stuff. It's a beautiful, beautiful phone, with one major problem. And if you're a Windows Phone guy, this could be a sticking point. It doesn't run Windows Phone OS. No, the camera's not very good. In fact, the camera, I've kind of downgraded it over time. At first I thought, well, this is okay. You know, it's good. And honestly, it's not that good. The Pixel camera is superior. The Samsung phones have great superior cameras as well. The iPhone typically does, although the iPhone 7 to me is actually a step down. But this is a way to get a Pixel for about 2/3 the price or even half the price, depending on which one you get, except for the camera. So I know a lot of people coming from Windows Phone are looking for alternatives. I just got a Moto G5 Plus in.
Great low price alternative, I think.
Yep, you can get it for under $200.
Not a great camera.
Nope, the camera is lousy. So but you know what? It's funny that we can even have that conversation, because honestly, these cameras aren't that bad. It's just that some cameras and smartphones are awesome.
Yep.
You know, so it's just not quite there. Other than that, this is the Nexus equation all over again. Flagship phone, the OnePlus that is, flagship quality phone, except for the camera. You know, but at 2/3 to 1/2 the price.
You know, watch what happens though, because in the next few months, any phone with big bezels and physical home buttons is going to look really antiquated, because it's going to start with the S8, which comes out later this week, and then Apple's iPhone. All the phones are going to be basically big slabs of glass with very little frame, and that's going to make all the phones, including the Pixel, especially the Pixel, look just like something from the 50s. You know, like a Stalinist design.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I honestly, to me, the camera's kind of job one. So it makes it a non-starter for me. It's too bad. And I've got a Samsung arriving tomorrow.
Me too. I'm very excited.
I believe it's going to come in a golden chariot with a
that price it better.
You know, the guy will hand it to me on like a little velvet pillow or something. Actually, speaking of which, so you have one coming, right?
I ordered the Orchid 8 Plus because I wanted to see.
Okay, so tell me something.
Yeah.
Has this arrived in the mail for you? Have you seen this?
No. What's that? That looks like your. Oh, did you get the Dex? Is that the Dex?
No. Well, maybe. It says Samsung Galaxy Amplifier Speaker Dock.
Oh, no, I didn't get that.
Yeah, I didn't order one of these. So
did you buy yours, or are you getting an editorial review yet?
No, I bought it.
And who did you buy it from?
Directly from Samsung.
Huh, that's why probably. I bought mine at Best Buy.
Well, when you buy it, I think when you buy it anywhere, you get that.
You get the gear. Yeah, you get the head.
And when I opened the box, I thought, oh, that must be the gear. But it was too small, and I haven't even opened it yet.
They're thanking you for trusting them once again.
Leo, it says right on here that it was made in China. I don't know if I want to even open this.
Made in China, exploded in the United States.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know. Okay, so I'll look at it later. But anyway. And the app pick of the week, this is kind of a non-standard peak, but it's so awesome.
Oh, so great.
Archive.org has a bunch of classic Mac operating systems and applications. In fact, I just played, I just forgot the name of it, Dark Castle. But actually, you can run like the black and white version of Microsoft Flight Simulator for the Mac. It's kind of incredible. Old versions of macOS, like macOS 6 and 7 are on there, I know. And let's see, I don't have a great link to this, but let me see if I can find the link.
I could pull it up.
It's just archive.org/details. /software library _Mac. And there's a lot of stuff in there. And it's really, really, it's pretty neat. There's a black and white version of Lemmings is on there.
I played that the other day.
Yeah. Really cool. Mac Paint, include actually different versions of Mac Paint. Microsoft Multiplan, which was their spreadsheet application before Excel. Mac Write, the word processor. Various versions of Microsoft Basic.
You heard the beep. I just booted my new Mac Plus.
I'm going to break up my hardware volume of Inside Macintosh and write some Pascal programs for this thing.
That's quite a thing to see. It's also.
I don't know if you saw the picture. Did you see the picture I put on Instagram?
No, not yet.
So if you go to Instagram /Thurrott, I assume. Sorry, I'm using Edge, so this isn't working.
Is there a browser on this System 7 disk? I don't think so.
Oh, I don't think so. I think that's.
I'm just teasing, obviously.
Oh yeah, that's System 7 is like 1990s.
I'm using this with the Surface, so it means it's the first touch Macintosh.
So I put what I did was I think it was Mac OS 6 on my 4K HP Spectre X360. And it's really funny because it looks like it's running at like 320 by 240 or something.
Yeah.
On this beautiful modern computer.
You want to see?
You could run it full screen, like you're doing right there.
You want to see what Word looked like back in 1985?
By the way, a Charles Simonyi product. That was him.
That's right. This is written in Hungarian, my friend.
Chief architect of this product.
Yeah, Word and Excel, right? Boy, this thing's so slow. Oh, this is 89. Where's the ribbon?
Yeah. Oh boy. Well, you know what? This kind of software is in vogue now, Leo. This is like one of those no distractions word processors.
It's my replacement for Notepad.
Yes,
and I guess the font.
Well, look at the options. This is
so funny.
By the way, it literally is more powerful than Notepad, but it's not much more powerful.
Is it more powerful? Really?
Well, yeah, you get font choices.
I get headers. I get footers. I get footnotes.
You can bold and
I can
italicize.
repaginate. Yeah. Look at the utilities. Find, change, go to, and spelling.
Amazing. Those are the days.
We have really come so.
So if you click in that close box on the document and hold on it, like isn't there a little animation, like a little? Yep, it's like a little almost a sprite showing you that you're clicking it.
This is how much thought they put into this. Remember, this is a megahertz 68,000.
Yeah.
Running it. I think how was it?
So the Amiga was 7 megahertz, but I think, but on the Mac it was not that fast.
I don't think it was that fast. Yeah, and it was a megabyte of screen RAM. It was what they called a 3M machine, and a megabyte of memory. Not a megabyte.
It was probably a million. It wasn't a million pixel screen, was it? Because it was.
No, 640 by 480. I'm sure. I don't know. It's fun to look at it anyway.
Yep.
And this runs fairly. I mean, this is running in JavaScript. So I think, right? I know.
But things have changed. Slightly.
Yeah.
So it could have been 4, 6, or 8 megahertz.
Here comes Alex Kumpel, who knows everything about this. It was 8 megahertz. So 8 megahertz, 68,000, right?
God, so it goes in.
And it had a mega RAM in the Mac Plus, or was it more? Yeah. We have to. Fortunately, we have the book. I can actually look this all up inside Mac.
Oh, I had all of those. By the way,
me too. Me too.
Volume 1, I had that in hardcover.
This is Alex's.
With the slipcase on it.
Yeah. This is Alex. Which is so strange because Alex is a Windows guy, but he's the king of Mac retro.
That's because he loves Pascal. You're going to see a lot of Pascal in there.
You love Pascal? He doesn't know Pascal, but there is a lot of Pascal. Yeah. Very fun. Good tip. Mary Jo Foley, your pick of the week.
Because we haven't had enough Linux on the show.
What?
Today.
More Linux? Woohoo!
Killing me here.
There was an announcement at DockerCon that Microsoft is going to be bringing Hyper-V Linux containers to Windows Server. So if you remember when Windows Server 2016 came out, it came out with 2 different kinds of containers. It came out with the regular, plain old vanilla Microsoft containers, Windows containers, and they came out with something called Hyper-V containers. Hyper-V containers actually use Hyper-V virtualization to give you an extra isolation layer to make it even more secure. But I didn't realize this till this week. They only had Windows Server Hyper-V containers. So now they're also going to have support for Linux containers under Hyper-V in Windows Server, but probably not until the next version of Windows Server, which is who knows when. They haven't said when. They said there will be one. But right now, I would guess that means 2018 or 2019. But at least the project is out there. I'm assuming there'll be test versions soon. So if you're somebody who actually likes the idea of the extra level of security from Hyper-V with your containers, your Docker containers, and you want to run Linux, stay tuned. That's tip 1 for enterprise. And instead of a code name, I'm doing another enterprise pick because there's just been so many fun things this week. We found out today during Microsoft's Data Amp event that was on the web that the next version of SQL Server, which is coming out mid this year, is going to be called SQL Server 2017. I know you're saying, of course, but a lot of people didn't think it was going to be called that because this version of SQL Server runs on Windows, on Linux, and on containers. So this is a brand new version of SQL Server coming out in probably a month or two, and it will be called SQL Server 2017 regardless of which platform it is on. The other interesting announcement that Microsoft made at Data Amp today was they rolled out 3 more of the cognitive services APIs that they have. So if you're a developer who's been interested in adding some of these kind of AI/machine learning capabilities to your apps, you now have 3 more things you can work with and add. These are not free. You have to buy them and pay for them, but you can test them for free. One is the Face API. So if you want to add face recognition to your app, this API is now available. There's a computer vision API that's now available that does things like automatically tagging and identifying things like celebrities, landmarks and such. That's now available. And the third is Content Moderator, another new API that will let people quarantine, review images, text, and video data before they publish them. So all of those are now available through the Azure Marketplace if you are a developer who is into adding those kinds of things to your apps. Those are my picks for the week.
By the way, Rich Turner is now at it again.
He is.
He is at it again. He says on Twitter, I have decided to rename Windows Subsystem for Linux to Paul so we can bash on Paul.
Unbelievable. I'm okay with it.
And he's got a shot, by the way, of the throttling page, where throttling is changed to Paul Thurrott. Introducing Paul Thurrott. You may remember some of the power experiments we did back in January. Paul Thurrott was one of these experiments and showed to have used up to 11% savings in CPU power consumption.
I'm what we call a failed experiment.
All right, time for beer, everybody.
Yeah.
What do you got for us?
And I have the perfect beer pick of the week this week.
Because you're moving tomorrow.
I'm moving tomorrow.
Everything must go.
Everything must go except my beer. I am actually bringing beer with me when I move.
Do you have a project brewing?
I'm not brewing anything right now, but I do have some beers that I'm going to be transporting between apartments. One of them is the beer pick of the week, and it's from Stone Brewing in California. They have a series called Enjoy By, which is a series of IPAs and double IPAs where they vary the hops and the malt bill. This week's pick is Enjoy By 4/20/17.
They actually have a countdown on the webpage.
They do.
10 hours left.
10 hours left. You don't actually have to drink this beer by tomorrow, but Stone says it's the freshest if you do drink it by 4/20. I've already tried one of these. It's very good. I like all the Enjoy Buys because I like double IPAs and IPAs. This one is, quote, devastatingly dank. So if you're a person who likes dank hop flavor.
Wow. Devastatingly dank.
Dank is a beer word too.
Wow.
And yeah, it's very good. It's very tropical. It's very kind of seeping with hops. I would say. So if you're not a person who appreciates hops, you might not enjoy the Stone Enjoy by 420. But if you do, you will.
I don't think Paul's not going to like this.
He's not going to like that one.
Seeping with hops.
This entire show has been terrible for me.
Linux picks, talking about Bash. Now we get
Poor Paul. Might as well just pile on, right?
What else is going to happen?
It was a lot of fun. Paul Thurrott is at thurrott.com, THURRO, and his books are at leanpub.com. Mary Jo Foley's at her ZDNet blog, which you can conveniently get to by typing in allaboutmicrosoft.com. And both of them are here every Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 1800 UTC for Windows Weekly. Thanks, you two. And we'll see you next time.
On Linux Weekly.
Good way to end that show. That's awesome.